and it's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Police examine new Partygate footage as MPs prepare to vote on Boris Johnson's future.
Good morning. Welcome to the programme at 6 o'clock on Monday, the 19th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
However you're watching, wherever you're watching, leading our news this morning. The Metropolitan Police says it is considering new footage that shows a party at Conservative HQ during lockdown. The Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, has apologised for the video, calling it indefensible.
It comes as the Prime Minister prepares to skip the vote today on the report that found Boris Johnson lied to Parliament. MPs will debate the findings, which could see Johnson barred from holding the parliamentary pass given to former PMs.
The Treasury has ruled out helping those struggling with higher mortgage bills, saying it risks fuelling further inflation. It comes amid predictions the Bank of England will raise interest rates for the 13th consecutive time later this week.
As Wyndham Clark beats Rory McIlroy to the US Open title in the past few hours, Paul Coit will be here with all the latest sport.
Yes, I will, and good morning. And yeah, Rory, so close, but don't forget we've got the Ashes, day 4. Starts at 11 o'clock this morning.
Good man. Paul, thank you very much indeed. And what about the weather? It was a bit of all sorts of things at the weekend.
Yeah, a bit of relief, actually, with some of the stormy weather. Will there be more this week?
Well, let's find out. Here's your latest forecast.
After a thundery end to the weekend, there's a chance of further thunderstorms over the coming few days. I'll have the full forecast a little later on.
OK, so here's our top story on this Monday morning as we start the week. Police are examining new footage that shows a party at Conservative campaign headquarters during lockdown.
The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove yesterday apologised for the video, calling it terrible and indefensible.
Now, all of this comes as MPs prepare to debate the report that found Boris Johnson to have deliberately misled Parliament. The Prime Minister and members of his cabinet are predicted to skip that vote.
Well, joining us now is the former political director to Boris Johnson, Alex Crowley, OBE. Good morning to you. Can this continue to do damage, do you think, to, I suppose, Rishi Sunak and the government, seeing more footage of a party that we were already aware of? Or is there kind of, I guess the question, is it already priced in?
Yes, I think it's somewhat priced in. Obviously, the video isn't a great watch for anyone involved, but it's a party we knew about. There were pictures of it at the time. There were profuse apologies at the time. There was disciplinary action of the staff members at the time. And we are perhaps getting into the phase now where, yes, we knew it happened. Yes, it shouldn't have happened. By and large, the people who were responsible or who were overseeing, of course, have either lost their jobs or moved on. Except, of course, the officials who probably still continue to work in government, they less so.
Except whoever's been put forward for an honour in Boris Johnson's resignation honours. So what do you think should happen there?
Well, that is a very tricky one. Of course, what I would say about that is that anyone who's nominated for an honour has to go through something of a vetting process. This party was known about when that list was submitted. Yeah. So if officials looked at that and thought they're OK to continue on the list, then I don't think it follows that just because a video emerges that somehow that judgment call changes.
Or nobody told them about it.
Well, the party was known about, perhaps not the video of the party,
yes,
but the party itself was known.
Okay.
Including a photograph, which showed Ben Mallet and Sean Bailey. So, exactly. I mean, if there's a problem with that, then there's a problem with the system, you could argue. What's your own view?
My own view is I don't think they should be stripped of it. As I say, I think you have to have some consistency. I think, as Michael Gove said yesterday, there is a legitimate question about is this whole system fit for purpose or not. That's a legitimate question. But this is how it's currently operating.
Michael Gove says it was indefensible. But Alex, your take on Michael Gove will not partake in the vote today. No. The Prime Minister will not turn up for the vote today. Boris Johnson won't be there for the vote today. So many members of the cabinet won't be there for the vote today.
Who will be?
Who will be? Who will be, exactly. So run through the politics of this for me, why people don't want to be associated with the vote.
So I think that there's a lot of Tory MPs, maybe even some cabinet ministers, that think that whilst the report was reasonably fair, the extent of the punishment went a bit too far. A lot of Tory MPs are in a tricky position. They want to draw a line under this. They want this thing to go away. But they also recognise that if you legitimise the severity of this punishment, think about what could happen to other ministers. And actually, the Labour Party should think about this too. Think about what could happen to future Labour ministers if this kind of political process can go this far. That's why I suspect many of them are simply going to find excuses for not turning up to the vote today.
Okay.
Alex, would you be in any way in favour of an amnesty for all of this? You know, to say, right, that was it. Now we stop and we move on.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. You know, how many more cases are we going to see of somebody had a photograph at a gathering they shouldn't have been? Or
5 years down the line.
Yeah, well, I mean, where do we stop this, right? We all know that it was a really, really tough time. These things shouldn't have happened. But, like, I think it is time to move on a little bit now.
And the line that the Prime Minister's using is that, you know, he'll have urgent business that he has to deal with being the Prime Minister. And let's be honest, there's a lot going on that he needs to be focusing on, not least this imminent anxiety about interest rate rises on Thursday and the very real pressure that puts on people with fixed-rate mortgages coming to an end in the next few weeks. Do you think that they're right to suggest that the Bank of England should press pause and not raise interest rates again? Or is that meddling?
you always get into the situation of if the government of the day professes any kind of view on what the bank should do, immediately everyone says, well, you can't interfere with their independence. But the fact of the matter is, the decisions the Bank of England take are inherently political because they really affect people's lives. I personally think that ministers are entitled to express a view on that. They don't have the power to do anything about it. But if it affects millions and millions of households, they should.
But is that the right thing to do, or will it just prolong the pain if they were to pause another? Because it's expected to, it's 4.5% at the moment. It could
now.
be 4.75. Some talk it could be 5%.
Well, the markets are priced in an even higher rate. They've paused it, I think, in America, and there may well be a case for that, because once millions of families can't pay the mortgage anymore, you've got a whole other crisis on your hands.
Yeah. It really is scary. It is scary. And Alex, I know you're going to come back and we're going to talk to you just after 7 o'clock as well. So much food for thought there. And we just want to say to you, if you are in that situation where suddenly you're being asked for another £300 a month or 400 or 500, where do you get it from? Who are you going to turn to? Who's there to help you? Is your home now in jeopardy? Let us know this morning. We want to share those views on air. GBviews@GBnews.com. I mean, I think a lot of people live the dream and they buy their home and it is their castle and they think this is amazing. Whatever else goes on in the world, I'm safe in my home. But
no, and now these 35 to 40-year mortgages talk of sort of prolonging this problem and waiting for this time bomb to go off as people are in retirement. It is a worrying time when it comes to home ownership at the moment. Of course, huge problems in the rental sector as well, but specifically on these interest rates.
I mean, everybody, everywhere, you're right. And then we had what's his name? William, what is he? Prince of Wales.
Prince of Wales, yeah.
The weekend, I thought a very noble and a fantastic thing where he's saying he pledges to end homelessness. Good luck with that, my friend. I don't think you will. But I think the fact is he's got land, he's got the money, he's got the inspiration of his mum in her fight against homelessness. And it would be amazing if he was able to do something because somebody has got to step forward and do something. And it's certainly not the government. They are not doing anything about this. I remember go to America 25, 30 years ago and think, this is awful, this homelessness here, homelessness. And you never saw it to that extent throughout the UK. But now it is a serious, serious problem. You can't avoid it. It's there. You see it all the time. And it's awful. So I think, well done, the Prince of Wales, for his aspiration in that direction. GBviews@GBnews.com. Let us know what you think.
Now, the number of people who've crossed the English Channel in small boats this year has topped 10,000 after more than 1,000 crossed over the past 3 days.
Now, this comes as ministers consider giving, here's a brainwave for you, British citizens priority for council housing. Right? So they're actually saying, well, if you've been born in this country, you should be further up the list than someone who wasn't born in this country. I would have thought that would have already been the case, but apparently not. Here's Migration Watch UK research consultant Jeremy Hutton. Not sure if you would agree with all of that, Jeremy, or not. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn and Isabel. Thank you for having me. Yes, it sounds utterly... Well, it's a sign of the farce that we're in, that the government is having to say, well, we'll have to ensure British people get priority for council housing. I think that typifies exactly why so many people are very annoyed and anxious about channel crossings, is that they see people coming to the UK and quite often being given quite nice houses and being bumped up the council housing lists, and it's just clearly not fair to a lot of other people who are really struggling, because the UK has a big housing crisis, it has a rental crisis as part of that as well. And if people just come in on a dinghy quite illegally, then it's extremely unfair.
So obviously 1,000 travelling over the weekend, with the weather being mostly good before the storms started. I suppose it all plays into why we saw the Prime Minister just sort of 10 days ago coming out and saying his plan was working, because we'd had a spate of, I mean, cynical of me to say, but we'd had a spate of bad weather. I mean, do you think he can really say that the government's plans are working?
At the time, I think it did seem more like that, but certainly every day since that speech seems to have gone against him quite significantly. If you look at it just quarter against quarter last year, it's actually only down 6% now on last year, which is, not really anything. I mean, the original forecasts were that the channel crossings would have risen, but the only reason they've not risen is because of a reduction in Albanians, at which there is news that the number of Albanians crossing could again be rising on what it was earlier this year. So it's still too soon to say on that front as well.
You're watching, like everyone else, with Migration Watch. What can be done about this? What would you like to throw in for consideration?
Well, the key thing, of course, is always to intercept, which is being done reasonably well by the Border Force and the Royal Navy, etc. And after that, of course, to detain and swiftly return to their home countries. In some cases, of course, you can't return someone to their home countries, but that's where something like the Rwanda plan is, of course, quite interesting and quite valuable, because that means that we can send them there to have their asylum claims processed, and then if they are then found to be without basis, then they have a new potential home there, or then they can then move on, whilst they're not then taking up housing stock in the UK and putting a burden on our own social services, which are at suffering tremendous pressures. So that's the key thing, getting to the stage where we can just detain quickly and return them quickly.
But, you know, that sounds right. A lot of people would say, yeah, don't see why you can't. They come ashore, you put them on a bus, you drive them to an airport where there is two planes always sitting fueled up, ready to go, and they'll fly them straight back to where? That's the point. The point from where they entered Britain, so they came from France or their original country of origin. Where on earth would something like that work? If it wasn't Rwanda, where could they go?
Well, the government is looking at other countries other than Rwanda that they might be able to replicate the scheme in. I mean, the government are quite bullish about the number of people the Rwandans are willing to take, but of course it would be very prudent to replicate that with other countries. Ideally, the basis of the plan is that once you get it up and running, people will see that if they cross into Britain, they're quite likely to be sent in the complete wrong direction by a significant margin, and then they will be less likely to come, and thus we will actually need to send fewer people to Rwanda or other countries that might be established. Others I've heard rumoured are, I think Ghana has been mentioned once or twice. I think it did initially turn down the government, but if the Rwanda scheme was to work, then I'm sure they'd think twice about that. And the European Union is certainly trying to do something with Tunisia, but that's still in a very early stage.
We talked about Rwanda and these possible other countries. We talked about Albania. We haven't talked much about France. I mean, we're always giving them more cash. Is there any evidence that they are beginning to slow the tide of illegal immigrants, particularly the people smugglers, cashing in on all of this?
It's very hard to say with the France, because, of course, the government are always very eager to make it out that the French are doing everything they can and they're getting good value for their money, good bang for their buck. I do think there is a sense that the French are trying harder, but the problem is that there's only so much the French can realistically do. So they're effectively playing whack-a-mole. I mean, there was some news out the other day that there's going to be a new spy plane, but spy planes don't stop boats. They only tell us where they are. They only tell us where they are on the beaches. But if there's thousands of people trying to put boats to sea on the shores of Calais, you need an army of French officers to stop them. And the more important thing is to break the business model. So it's not worth paying for a ticket on one of these small boats, and it's not worth the traffickers going through the rigmarole of providing these boats. Yes. So once you make it unprofitable for both the customer and the person buying the boat, that's when it will stop working. There's only so much the French
not providing social housing, not providing council housing ahead of people born in this country is a factor which may deter. I just want to know, Jeremy, overall, how solvable is this? I mean, I look at it and I think, I don't think this is solvable. I just think it's going to get worse and worse as climate change and geopolitical factors come into account with all of this. I personally don't have a view that, I
don't think the boats are going to be stopped.
No.
Stop the boats. There's such a big claim.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised.
What do you think? Do you think it's solvable with the right will? And if so, in what time period?
Well, that is the big question. The whole point of the current illegal migration problem is that it's pushing the boundaries of a series of international legal obligations that the UK has signed itself up to over the past 75 or so years, since World War II. And those legal obligations make it very difficult for the UK to actually create the laws to get around those. And that's why we're probably going to have a bit of a bust up with the European Court of Human Rights over the illegal migration bill. I think if the current plan doesn't work, and that's when people are really going to start saying we need to be looking at these international legal obligations and working out what it is that's stopping these things, because the pressures that are going to keep coming into Europe, as you say, quite rightly, are only going to keep increasing. But countries like Britain can only take so many people because there's a very small country. We're incredibly densely populated as it is. So I'm very pessimistic about solving them without looking at those legal obligations, and I think that's something that requires a lot more attention. But hopefully, the illegal migration bill will sort this out. But we'll see.
Well, you keep watching. He's Jeremy Hutton. He's a research consultant at Migration Watch UK, and we appreciate your time and your views this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, if you enjoyed a glass of vino in the sunshine this weekend, you're not alone.
Did you?
I did, a glass or two.
Yes.
Almost half of us.
Do you think I'm a bore that I don't drink?
I think it's very unusual, but, we all have our vices and,
Maybe I have some other vice.
Exactly.
Maybe there's something else. Because I would like to drink. I just don't like the taste of it.
You just got to push through that. That's what most kids don't like, the taste, and then they just push through it.
Yeah. But I agree with you. You like pinky things.
Yeah.
And I think they're sweeter by and large, aren't they?
I don't like the sweet ones. I like the dry ones, the pale
So you're not
ones.
a dessert wine sort of person?
Well, I don't mind a dessert wine with pudding, but then it has to be a tiny, tiny bit.
Right, okay.
But anyway, I'm a wine bore. There's a happy medium, isn't there? Well, I'm turning into one, I didn't used to be.
What's your favourite type of wine?
Very pale rosé from Provence.
Yeah, so you know what you like. You know what you like. Well, almost half of you are regular wine drinkers. Sales are growing year after year after year.
But forget the south of France or the southern hemisphere. The UK wine market is now valued at $22.5 billion. It might be valued in dollars, with 800 vineyards across the UK.
800 vineyards in Britain. Well, today is the start of English Wine Week, and our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has been to visit a vineyard in Shropshire to find out more.
When it comes to a bottle of wine, England is probably not the country you'd think of as the place to go. In fact, the UK has been more committed to drinking it, ranking 6th in the world for overall consumption. But over the past decade, things have changed dramatically, and England is an exciting force in the wine world, producing world-class vintages and winning prestigious awards. There are now over 800 vineyards across Britain, and the family-run Hencote Vineyard and Winery in Shropshire is one of those making an impression, having previously won gold at the International Wine Challenge. Managing Director Mark Stevens says vineyards like his across the country are breaking the stigma of winemaking.
There's still that idea that growing vines or having vineyards is a romantic continental notion, and it's not so much seen in the UK, although it is increasing in popularity. And the other is wow, I didn't realise just how much work it takes to produce quality wine, because you can put a vine in the ground, you can press the grapes, and you can produce wine from that. But to make that difference in such a cool climate, to really make that difference for medal-winning wines, there's a really precise amount of work that's required.
In 2021, more than 9 million bottles of English wine were sold around the world. That's up 31% on the previous year. Sparkling wine accounted for 68% of the different varieties sold.
Now, we know weather here in the UK can be inconsistent, from sunshine like it is today to frost in the winter. So what are some of the adaptations that vineyards have to make here?
Gavin Patterson is the winemaker at Hencote and says heat is just one of the challenges they must overcome.
Well, one of the challenges, actually, we see it as, is the light intensity and heat. Just due to our latitude, we focus a lot on canopy management in our vineyards to optimize exposure to sunshine and obviously heat as and when we are able to get the sun shining on the grapes, so that we can get the grapes fully ripe.
But as a nation of wine drinkers, are people across the country in favour of a homegrown grape?
Have you ever tried English wine?
No.
Would you try English wine?
I'd try anything if it was going cheap.
I think it's got a burgeoning reputation, let's say, you know, that I think there's more of it, and if it was more like prevalent, then I'd probably choose to drink it, yeah.
It's okay, it's expensively sour, shall we say.
I would buy it. You don't see it so often, or, you know, it tends to be a bit more expensive than the other wines, but you get what you pay for, I guess. So yeah, I would definitely buy it.
As time goes on, winemakers learn from every harvest, and the British industry seems to be going in the direction of growth. The future looks bright for vineyards across the country. Jack Carson, GB News, Shropshire.
You could say one of the benefits of climate change.
Yeah.
That's a whole industry.
Well, it's kind of ironic because actually one of the big drivers of climate change is people like me who would be drinking wine from South Africa, California, New Zealand.
You're going to say people like me who are drinking bucket loads
the carbon
of it.
footprint of bringing all this booze from the other side of the world.
Yes.
But now we can get it on our doorstep thanks to, you know, that climate change that we caused.
So there's a lot of vineyards in... so that was Shropshire. There's a lot of vineyards in Kent.
Surrey. There's lovely Denbies in Surrey, isn't there?
Is that right? So that is definitely a change. And is there a snobbery associated with British wine not being as good as other continental brands? I suppose it's all the same when you're off your head. You know, I suppose it doesn't really matter as long as you feel happy. 23 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock. The rest of today's top stories are these.
The Home Secretary has urged police chiefs across England and Wales to ramp up the use of stop and search powers. Suella Braverman said officers who use the powers have her full support. However, critics of stop and search say it's disproportionately targeting black and ethnic minority communities.
Strikes within the healthcare system have resulted in over 500,000 NHS appointments, operations and procedures being postponed in England alone. Industrial action began towards the end of last year in a dispute over NHS pay.
The former footballer and TV pundit Graham Souness has completed a 21-mile charity swim across the English Channel. The 70-year-old's raised more than £1 million for Deborah UK, which is a national charity supporting individuals and families affected by epidermolysis bullosa.
It's just an awful condition. It just means...
skin disease.
Oh, your skin, you can't bear anything to touch it. Your skin cracks, whatever.
Oh.
But well done, Graham. He completed that swim yesterday. 12 hours, 17 minutes. Well done. And I think what's great about that is that he's not a swimmer, he's not a sea swimmer, he's not, you know...
and he's not young.
And he's 70 years of age, you know, so fit as a fiddle, it has to be said. So when you're motivated by something that it's that important, he met a young girl who suffers from this, and that really just set him on his course. So I think a big applause to him. I think a big applause to the Prince of Wales about trying to end homelessness as well. I think often we bypass all the good stories.
I totally agree.
Good.
Yeah, it's like a reminder of the good people around us, and also the parents in Nottingham last week, the best of us.
Yeah.
And, you know, we focus so much on the kind of the lies, the rule breaking, the stuff that goes on at the heart of government, but actually,
the negativity.
You know, there's a lot of great, positive-minded, civic-minded people doing wonderful things.
Andy Murray winning another tennis tournament.
In?
Nottingham. Well, Nottinghamshire.
Nottinghamshire.
So he did that as well. So that's good in the build-up to Wimbledon. And this is Royal Ascot week, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad you said yes, because I was thinking, did I get my weeks wrong? So all of these things happening, and I hope there's some levity coming into your life and something that makes you smile. Rory will not be smiling. Rory McIlroy narrowly missing out on the top spot at the US Open to a guy called Wyndham Clark. That happened about 3 o'clock in the morning this morning. So Paul Coyte will put you in the picture next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back, 6:28. Still to come on today's programme.
After a British Airways flight, this is some story, was forced to turn back over severe turbulence over the Bay of Bengal. It left crew members requiring hospital treatment. At 6:45, we're going to find out why air turbulence is on the rise. Apparently it's not going away, it's only going to get worse. So if you're a nervous flyer, you're going to have to get used to bumpier flights. If you've got a story to tell on that, do get in touch with us this morning. And do you recall a particularly bad
I had a really
flight?
bad one flying back from Ecuador in South America, flying over the Andes, and we just suddenly dropped.
No.
And my bum came off the seat, and I thought we were going to die.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'd had food poisoning the 3 days prior to flying back, so I was borderline whether I could fly anyway, but it was the end of my 3 months there, and I was desperate to come home, and I just thought, this is the worst week of my life. Yeah, it was so bad.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was fine.
Gosh,
it was all fine.
gosh.
But the Andes, I think where you're over mountains, it's particularly dodgy. The Bay of Biscay, the Bay of Bengal, where you've got lots of bodies of water. I don't know. I'm no expert. We'll be speaking to the experts that can tell us why it's
but
all
apparently
happening.
it's going to get more common. I mean, if you cross the equator, it's there.
Right.
I have over the Bay of Biscay, always I find really bad if you're flying between, say, Portugal and London. Whereas the worst one I had was maybe from out of Miami across the Atlantic. And I always feel bad about that because you think, there's only water beneath you, you know, there's nothing else. So it can be scary times, and I think we need more reassurance from pilots who are flying. If they are in control, say to us, guys, this feels bad, but honestly, things are fine.
Although, now as we're getting older, when they do speak on the tannoy, I always think they sound so young. I don't find it that reassuring.
Well, you see, the way I look at it is...
18, I've just left school.
Look at the Battle of Britain. I mean, you had pilots
That's
at
true.
19,
That's absolutely
20...
true. You need good eyes and good
and they were
minds.
Fighter pilots
Absolutely
as well.
right.
I think that. Also, a new report finds that school children are being taught explicit content in schools before they reach puberty. At 7:20, we'll be asking if sex education is going too far on that one. And what are your own memories of sex education, if at all, if you have?
I remember watching a cartoon at school. We were 8. To be fair, it was very, very basic, but it was, you know, birds and the bees. But I still remember sniggering and giggling. And
Were there willies in it?
I don't think so. No, it was very sweet.
So there was no bits?
No bits, but it was just like mummy and daddy cuddles type scenarios. and what that resulted in. We were like, oh.
Well, get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com and share us your...
Keep them, you know,
What are you
PG.
sniggering about?
I'm not sniggering. I'm not sniggering.
You're the sort... If you were sitting beside you in class, he would get you in trouble, Isabel.
It was as soon as you said get in touch, that was the thing that started making me snigger. I couldn't help myself. I apologise.
Enough said. Let's have a look through the back pages. Here they are. The Express leads with par for the curse. This is after Ollie Robinson defends his F-bomb in as Ash's passion. So I didn't see it myself, but Paul will tell us all about that. You Aussie whinger, says the Mail, accusing the Australians of double standards for their reaction to Robinson's outburst. So they were offended, were they?
I don't think they were very offended. I don't think the players were actually offended.
Yeah, OK. And finally, England United. The Mirror says Luke Shaw is on a charm offensive, enticing Harry Kane and Declan Rice to come to Man U. OK. So, Paul, where do you want to begin with that?
Do you want to start with the cricket, since we mention it?
Yeah.
So Ollie Robinson then, one of our fast bowlers, bowled out Usman Khawaja for 141. Now, Khawaja was playing really well for the Australians. And firstly, the thing is, the way the whole Bazball situation is, you know, with Ben Stokes, who's the captain, and there are changes in the way that England play now, keeps it exciting. They had this field placing, and it was like when you used to play those board games as a kid, where you would just place everybody around to catch. It was like this V shape around Khawaja just to make him uncomfortable. So anyway, managed to get the wicket, worked very well, tried to play it out, and it was caught. So as the wicket was taken, then we got Ollie Robinson. I'm going to try and I'll try and bleep this out. Shouts at him, something off you, something in something. And that's what he shouted at Khawaja as he walked off.
Well, that's just not cricket.
It kind of is. That's the thing. They've changed all that because now they've got stump mics. They've got these microphones in the stumps, so you can pick up everything. And so he gave him it was a little bit of verbal, you know, and this is what happens in cricket. Whereas I think it's people around the outside, they're going, you can't say that. It's disgraceful. Khawaja was fine with it. Ollie Robinson just said, look, it's the Ashes. If you can't handle that, then what can you handle? This is this is at the highest level. You've got to expect a little bit. You're not happy with that, are you?
About Boris Johnson doing an interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg's son that was published this weekend about if you're not happy with the umpire's decision in cricket, you just accept it and head back to the pavilion in a gentlemanly fashion.
Yes.
Just made me think of that.
But you can still have a go at someone else as well if it's not the umpire. But anyway, it's just a really exciting game. We've got Moeen Ali, who also is the bowler that was brought in. We mentioned him last week because Jack Leach was injured, so Moeen Ali came out of retirement. But he's not really used to playing Test cricket because the first time he's played in a couple of years, and has got a nasty cut on his spinning finger, which is the forefinger there. So when he was out on the edge of the field, he sprayed something on it, which you'd think was OK, just to dry it out. But then there's been problems with that because he's not allowed to, because
it could give him extra grip, or it could...
Exactly, and they could say, well, ball tampering. He could ask the umpire. You can say, look, is it all right if I do this? And normally they would say no anyway. He wasn't tampering the ball, but he was just trying to do something with his finger. But he's now been fined 25% of his match fee because it's not allowed. But, I mean, the problem is that...
Yeah. Blisters are awful.
And your feet?
Yeah.
And if you're holding a cricket ball around the seam and you're trying to do that, you've got a blister, you're not going to get the spin you want.
I so admire women from the point, like, you're socialising with me this week and we're going to the races, right?
Do you remember the first time we went to Ascot all those years ago? You've actually carried me out of the place because my feet were squeezed into a pair of shoes size too small.
Then you returned the compliment when I was afflicted.
There we go. That's friendship.
Yes, that's what friends are for.
Did you use legal spray, though?
No, but...
Was that all right?
Where I admire women is that they have got to wear high heels in
Yes.
certain scenarios.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure you'd love to wear trainers or something like that. But, I mean, it's pretty... That explains why you'll plonk yourself in a hospitality tent.
And not move.
And take something to anaesthetise
Oh,
the
yes,
pain.
that's a good idea.
It's a good idea.
Medical suggestion.
Don't move around else. Now, the football situation... I know, Rory, let's talk about Rory.
Yes, Rory.
So this happened just after 3 o'clock this morning.
Yes.
What was the score? He finished, what, 2-1?
Just one shot.
Just one shot.
Missed by one shot. So Rory hasn't won a major since 2014. So this drought continues, but he's getting so close now. And the next one is the Open, happens in July, which is at Hoylake, which is up in Liverpool. So he's just getting so near. It was a guy called Wyndham Clark. I don't know about you, but golfers, American golfers, Wyndham Clark, Scotty Scheffler,
the third,
Brooks Koepka,
Tiger Wood.
Tiger.
Strange name.
They've got Tiger's a nickname, but the others, I don't think Brooks is. But none of the others. It's just something about American golfers. Davis Love the third was the one you were thinking of there.
There is this situation, and this comes from Scotland, Scottish influence, and it's spread into Northern Ireland as a result that they take the surname of their uncles, aunts, grandparents, whatever, and that becomes their first name. So
Right.
Wyndham probably is not a...
Oh, do you think so?
Oh, yeah. So it's a sort of Scottish thing where they take the surname and it comes first.
This is like the Icelandic thing, where you take the mother's surname. It's like Björk Gudmundsdottir.
I like that.
So she is the daughter of Gudmund.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then again, you never have a family with the same surname, do you? That'd throw you a little bit for me.
Yeah, but
with the Dottir and the son.
lady's name alive.
Magnus Magnusson was very easy for Magnus because they were all called Magnus.
Yes.
So they're all called Magnus Magnusson.
Yes.
There you go.
I love the routes we go down in sport.
But anyway, it was won by Wyndham Clark. So whether his nickname, his real name, he won.
And when are we going to see you again, as the 3 Degrees would say?
I think I will see you again in about 8:20, if that's all right for you.
Look forward to that. Thank you very much
Pleasure.
indeed, Paul Coit there.
Right, stay with us. We're going to be discussing the latest in the government's housing plans. Is the country headed for a mortgage catastrophe? We're going through the papers with Emily Carver and Christopher Biggins next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
At 20 to 7. Good morning to you, wherever you're watching or listening from. We're going to bring you up to date with the front pages of the newspapers before we head into the review.
Yeah, the Times is saying that the government's to give British citizens priority when it comes to receiving council houses amid migration concerns.
Your views on that very welcome. The Mail reveals banks are being told to wait before imposing another rate hike amid fears of a 13th consecutive interest rate this week. What are the chances of that?
The Sun believes Rebecca Vardy set to fight Colleen Rooney over eye-watering legal costs after losing that libel battle last year.
And the Star reports a story which was covered in a few of the papers over the weekend. Beer companies are lowering the amount of alcohol because drinkers are concerned about their health. No, that's not true.
Cost cutting.
What?
Isn't it cost cutting?
Yeah, they're lowering the alcohol because they're taxed less on the alcoholic level, and it's basically shrinkflation again because they can charge the same prices for less alcohol, and they miss having to have the revenue imposed on them, the tax imposed on them with that. So that's not the story. And also I find it pretty patronising always that politicians do this. They think we've slashed a penny off a pint or whatever and that'll make the whole world happy. They all get blutered and then everybody thinks all's well with the world. So it is the great beer robbery. Brewers have been accused of cutting alcohol levels to save money. So they're cutting the alcohol level, but they're not cutting the price that you are paying.
Now, we're going through the papers this Monday morning with the actor and entertainer Christopher Biggins and the columnist at Conservative Home and presenter at GB News, Emily Carver. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Emily, should we start with that story? We've already touched on it a little bit about Britons being given priority on council house lists. A lot of people perhaps a bit miffed that this isn't happening anyway.
Well, yes, I think most people would have assumed that it was happening already. This is definitely what the government wants us to be talking about after that lockdown party footage came out over the weekend in the Sunday Mirror.
Oh,
there we go.
Boring.
This is a plan. It might be in legislation come the King's Speech in autumn. It will require councils to push citizens and permanent residents higher up waiting lists. Apparently only 1 in 10 of those given a home are currently non-UK citizens. So it's, well, 1 in 10 is still significant, but it's not a massive amount of people who are bumped up the list because they're foreign or whatever. Although in some places, for example in Brent, the Times notes, that's in northwest London, 40% of new social homes were let to non-UK citizens last year, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a very diverse area, but you would have thought if you just arrived in the country, you wouldn't be given social housing, but apparently you do.
Are. Yeah. I do think there's a moral duty as well. You could argue, well, to the migrants there's a moral duty, but to people who've paid their taxes and been in that constituency for so long, you think they should come first.
Top of the list.
Top of the list, Biggins, yeah.
Absolutely. I don't understand it. And it seems so wrong. And we were talking before, weren't we, in the green room here today? I think next to breathing, you should have a home. And I think, you start off with one room, kitchen and bathroom, and then you get another room. As you become more successful, you build on that. But you shouldn't not have somewhere to live.
The problem is there's such a shortage across the board in the private rental market, and also with social housing. If the government, this is a bit of a distraction almost, because the government simply needs to allow more houses to be built, which will bring down those private rents so more people can live in the private rental market and also have social housing available for those who need it. Because it is a bit unfair sometimes. I was saying this because you have people who've had social housing passed down from family members and they're working just like everyone else, and then someone, it's much cheaper than private rent. It's all a bit unfair. I think we just need more housing.
But if you drive around London, at night, you see these blocks of flats empty. Now, how is that? How can that be?
Well, they're just unaffordable to the ordinary people.
No, but they should be.
Yeah, they're all foreign investors.
Foreign investors, China.
It's better than a bank deposit because they're getting, 10% increase.
Exactly.
On the
that should be stopped.
But it does lead, we'll come, sorry to bypass you, Biggins. We will come to you, but it just leads on to the story that Keir Starmer's got on the front of the Telegraph. He's doing this big speech in Scotland. He's talking about net zero, but he's also talking about basically building on the green belts, on beauty spots, because he's identified that this is a huge issue that actually in relation to energy, all of that.
Yeah, so our deputy political editor, Tom Harbour, will be absolutely delighted by this proposal from Keir Starmer. He's always banging on about planning and how it's holding back our economy, holding back our housing, etc., etc. Keir Starmer saying he'll scrap the ban on new onshore wind farms. At the moment, there's a bit of a ban from the Tories since 2012. He wants to get building lots of onshore wind, but call me a cynic, but he's been having a bit of trouble over his net zero policies. You had Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, saying, actually, we can't afford the £28 billion a year we were going to put towards climate change. And he also was flip-flopping over oil and gas. he got into trouble with the trade unions over saying we need to ban all new exploration. So this is him probably trying to say, no, wait, guys, I am pro-net zero. Don't worry, I'm going to get wind farms built.
Let me ask this question. We talk about offshore, which must be very expensive to install a wind farm in water, in a tidal area. What is the problem with onshore wind farms? Why is that such an issue?
Well, it's the NIMBYs, isn't it? It's people not wanting them in their area.
And I think they're funny enough, they are an eyesore. I mean, you know, they're brilliant what they do, but I think it's not. You suddenly see they're not. You don't think, oh, isn't that attractive?
Yeah, but the same with electricity pylons, you know, and motorways. Motorways are ugly. Cars being parked all over roads in London are ugly, but we just get used to it.
I suppose we do. You're right.
People question how eco-friendly they are because they take a lot of energy to build and construct, and sometimes they don't work very well.
Well, that's a different point. I mean, I take that, but for instance, I said this a couple of weeks ago. I was in Glasgow, and you head up to the hills south of Glasgow, or west of Glasgow actually, and there's the biggest wind farm in Europe there. But basically it's at the top of barren hills, not mountains or anything else. It's just barren hills, which is full of heather and whatever. And it actually was quite majestic biggins to see. And have you ever flown into Glasgow Airport, which I'm sure you do, that you can look down and you can see all of this. And I just sort of think we must have lots of scrubland, lots of areas that are just hills that surely we can stick windmills on the top of them. But as Isabel says, NIMBYism, a lot of this is as well. Anything you'd like to add about wind farms? Or
No, I think we can go on, though, to if we're going all out of order today, because, of course, Prince William has come with a marvellous idea, which is to build houses and on the Royal Duchy, too, which is fantastic. I mean, I think this is a brilliant idea, and I think this is a king in the making, because I think this is exactly what we should be doing, and the royal family should be doing. I mean, it's a very important thing. Because the trouble is, we were also talking about Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace should, and I think the king will do this, should be made into an art gallery, you know, somewhere the public can go to, because he hates it to live in, and it's a horrible place to live in. Whereas it could make a lot of money for the country.
Interesting.
But anyway, I think Prince William's idea is fantastic.
Yeah, we do think he needs to be applauded for that, and I hope it comes to fruition, hope it comes to something.
And I think this is the whole way that the royal family is going to look at itself in the future, because it's not going to be... I mean, the coronation was absolutely fantastic, and we showed the world how to do it. But it cost a lot of money.
It just shows that you can have a cause within the royal family.
Yes.
Because, of course, you know, Meghan and Harry, they wanted to, you know, set out and become activists elsewhere and improve the world. That's what they said. But actually, Prince William and his wife are doing so much in this country.
Yeah, and following on the legacy of his mother, Princess Diana, who kind of invented it, really.
Duty.
Yeah. So much in terms of what should be a service or what should be a business, you know, and I think it should be, you know, a necessity, a service to provide housing, public housing, and it's not. And I really just don't understand why it's not done, why it's not insisted upon. And another thing, watching Countryfile last night, I just want to leave you with this thought, that the reason a lot of our rivers run dry, particularly those on chalk beds, is because the utility companies just pump the water out of them. And they're allowed to do so by the Environment Agency.
Pump it out to put it where? Just
into reservoirs or into your tap or into, somewhere where it's cleaned up or whatever. And this is the whole thing. Rather than they build holes in the ground or more reservoirs, they would rather steal it from existing rivers, and therefore all the wildlife suffers as a result and whatever. So I think, again, utility companies, water companies in particular, their record of public service is appalling, absolutely appalling. And let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com. Meanwhile, guys, we'll say goodbye to UC in 40 minutes' time. You may want to listen to this thing, turbulence, air turbulence, when you're on an airplane. Scary thing.
Yes, 5 British Airways crew members were seriously injured and passengers absolutely terrified when a plane encountered the most severe turbulence the airline had witnessed in years.
Because often cabin crew have got to manoeuvre up and down the aisles and make sure we're all OK, and they can't strap themselves themselves in. So studies are showing the severe turbulence has increased by over half, 55% in the past few years, and is projected to become even more intense. Why is that?
Well, they believe possibly down to climate change. But the question we're asking is how worried we should be about all of this. Let's speak to the former British Airways pilot, Eric Moody. Good morning to you, Eric. Goodness me, one of these crew on the flight had to have surgery after the turbulence on Friday. How unusual is that?
Well, it's very unusual. I think it's almost a one-off experience, but you never know when it's going to happen.
You never know, Eric. I mean, is there not equipment on board that can predict some sort of radar? You can't see it?
No, you cannot see clear air turbulence or turbulence of any sort. And all you've got to do is consider that the air is a fluid like water, and it's got currents in it. And you know very well that at sea you can get unexpected currents, and you get them in the air, and you get turbulence from all sorts of reasons. You go through a current, you go through the edge of a jet stream. If you go through at right angles, it will be more than if you fly down a jet stream. A jet stream is very handy to get you back home from America, for instance, if you get it up your backside. And you just cannot see what the air is doing. You have to guess. And the best advice I can ever give you is whenever you're seated in an aeroplane, and don't get up and walk about unnecessarily, although I used to do it once an hour, because I think you need to keep your blood circulating. However, when in the seat, keep your seatbelt lightly fastened. You don't have to have it tight. Just keep it around you, and it will stop you being thrown around the aeroplane. But unfortunately, with the cabin crew, as you said, they have to do what they're there for, and that's serve food and
make sure we're all
unless
safe.
The captain is aware of this turbulence and he can make them sit down, which he does on occasions. But I mean, to hear that people have got very short memories. I mean, I flew for many, many years, and I shall never forget going over northern India. Air was coming off the Himalayas, and we couldn't read the instrument panel on a VC-10 this was, and it went on for about 15 minutes, and it was like cobblestones, but worse. So it's not a new phenomenon. It's there, I'm afraid. And you've got to realise you can't
Eric,
tell.
that the experts are saying it's going to become more common with climate change.
Well, what I'll say to that, Eamonn, is expert is a funny word. It comes from the Latin, doesn't it? X is an unknown quantity, drips a spurt under pressure. I'm afraid experts are experts, and they don't really know a lot.
But Eric, I mean, so many times we've been on flight, especially if it's a long-distance flight, and you get the impression that pretty much the pilots are kicking back and chatting to the stewardesses or whatever and having a nice time, and the plane's flying itself. What happens in that scenario when you hit turbulence? Can the plane look after itself, or does the pilot have to jump into action from being asleep or chatting in the galley, whatever it might be?
Well, you can't stop the thing going up and down if it wants to sometimes. And the best thing you can do is to probably take the autopilot out and just let it ride the bumps, because that's what they are. They're bumps. And the other hand, you don't want to take the autopilot out and then you can't hand fly it through it. So it's you have to take decisions from time to time, and every incident you have to do it the way you see it.
See,
I know the pilots will be. I know the pilots will be very busy when they hit turbulence. I think it would be helpful, though. Lack of communication is not helpful. I think they have to talk to the passengers on board and say, look, I don't know how long this is going to take, but we will get through this, and the plane is not going to fall apart.
Well, it won't fall apart because it's well made and it's designed to cope with that sort of thing. And, pilots are busy sometimes, not that often, but sometimes. And they always should keep the passengers informed. And I notice that I fly myself still as a passenger, and I get quite cross when you're not told what's happening. There's plenty of time to do these things, but let's be honest, there are only 2 pilots now on most aeroplanes, whereas there used to be 3. And obviously the time you've got is less, but that's progress, and people want progress. I don't, but
Eric, great talking to you. Look him up if you don't know who he is and what he's done. Eric Moody there. Really, really appreciate that, Eric. And but we're out of time. We've got to flaps down. Whatever you do, your undercarriage is lowered. We're ready to come in for an
undercarriage is more important than flaps, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Cheers. Thanks for getting up.
Speaking of turbulence and weather, let's have a little look at what the weather's going to do for us here today.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's generally a showery picture as we start off the new working week. It's all due to low pressure that is in control of the weather across the UK, bringing unsettled conditions, particularly so for Scotland first thing. This occluded front has been pushing its way northwards overnight, bringing some heavy rain, and there is a rain warning in force until 12 o'clock today. Could be some surface water issues until that eventually clears. Will be quite breezy across the northeast as well throughout this morning. A drier start to the day elsewhere, but into the afternoon the sunshine is strong and it will help develop some showers. They could be locally heavy with some thunderstorms, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland and maybe southern Scotland later on. Generally further towards the south and east, staying drier with some sunshine, and in that sunshine climbing to highs of 25 or 26 degrees Celsius. As we head into the evening, there'll be some late sunshine for many of us, and the showers will gradually ease their way off, taking longest for parts of the north and west. But clear spells developing overnight. Might see some isolated mist and fog patches forming underneath those clear skies. Remaining quite humid for many of us, particularly across southeastern areas of England as we feed in this cloud and rain from the continent. Temperatures holding up around 14-15 degrees Celsius, but might drop into single figures in some rural areas. Throughout Tuesday then, we are watching this area of heavy rain push up from the south. There is still uncertainty in regards to the exact details and track of this, so do stay up to date with the forecast, but it could bring some torrential downpours of rain with some thunderstorms as well. Whilst it'll be a drier start for Scotland and Northern Ireland, again heavy showers and thunderstorms could develop into the afternoon, and some surface water issues are possible. Temperatures, if you see some of the sunshine, climb to highs in the low or mid-20s. So we head towards the middle part of the week. High pressure is wanting to reclaim control, so the showers will generally become fewer and less intense as we head towards Thursday, and it'll also be that little bit less humid. Bye-bye.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant Vickery, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
MPs prepare to vote on Boris Johnson's future as police examine new Partygate footage.
Hello there, very good to see you. Welcome on board. The time, 1 minute past 7. It's Monday the 19th of June. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Prime Minister will skip the vote today on the report that found Boris Johnson lied to Parliament. MPs will debate the findings, which could see Johnson barred from holding a parliamentary pass.
Now, it comes as the Metropolitan Police say it's considering this new footage that shows a party at Conservative HQ during lockdown. The Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, has apologised for the video. He says it is indefensible.
The Treasury's ruled out helping those struggling with higher mortgage bills, saying it risks fuelling further inflation. It comes amid predictions the Bank of England will raise interest rates for the 13th consecutive time later this week.
Ministers are considering prioritising British citizens when it comes to access to social housing. The move could be included in the King's speech in the autumn in a bid to tackle concerns around migration.
We're a nation of speeders. Almost 250,000 drivers end up in court every year. We'll ask if the strict speed limits are to blame.
It's a racket.
It is. Why do you need a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit around a school when it's the holidays or at 3 in the morning?
Yeah.
I think we need to allow drivers to have a certain element of intelligence when it comes to these sorts of things. I never forget being stopped on the way into Sky when we were doing a breakfast show together there, and it was 3 in the morning, it was 30 miles an hour on 3 lanes of traffic motorway. I don't need to go at 30 miles an hour. The policeman said, "Are you sure you want to argue with me about this?" I was like, no, but I thought there were other things you could be doing right now.
No, I get that, and I'm not a speeder. I don't approve of speeding in any way, but I agree with Isabel that you've got to have some sort of discernment about this. The thing that gets me is I watch those programmes, Dashcam, whatever, and you see all these horrible people who steal cars, drive up pavements, knock down lampposts, police chases involved in all of this, and they get something like, 2 points on their licence and a 20 quid fine, delayed for 5 years because they can't afford to pay it type thing. And yet you park on a double red line or something and you'll be put in jail, more or less. So I think the penalties are completely out of proportion. And let's be real, what is a real crime? Not doing 23 in a 20 zone, but, doing 150 or whatever in a 30-mile-an-hour zone should just immediately result in a jail sentence, it has to be said. However, it's nice weather for driving, or maybe not, because it could get a bit stormy. I think it was raining overnight. I think while we were sleeping, it was quite stormy.
Yeah, it's cleared the air a little bit. Let's get a little taster of what the forecast might have for us later in the show.
After a thundery end to the weekend, there's a chance of further thunderstorms over the coming few days. I'll have the full forecast a little later on.
To our top story this hour, MPs are to debate the damning report that found Boris Johnson had deliberately misled Parliament, with the Prime Minister and members of the Cabinet predicted to skip the vote.
Now, police are examining new footage that shows a party at Conservative campaign headquarters. This was all during the lockdown, and it has caused a lot of reaction.
Well, the Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, has apologised for the video and called it terrible and indefensible.
Former political director of Boris Johnson, Alex Crowley, with his take on all of this. Nothing much. I mean, Michael Gove says it all there. But, however, he's not turning up today for a vote which would determine whether Parliament approves of the inquiry and its findings or not. So, people say one thing and then do another, really, with their actions. Why is it important for the Prime Minister, for Michael Gove, for certain cabinet members not to turn up and be seen to vote on this?
I think there's a general desire in the Conservative Party for this whole issue now to go away, to be resolved and to have a line drawn underneath it. The report is what it is. We all know what the problems were. Boris Johnson has received his punishment and then some for overseeing the parties during lockdown. This latest video is, whilst it is uncomfortable viewing, it's something that we all know about. It's somewhat baked in.
I suppose what this video highlights in some ways is actually the resignation honours. You know, Boris Johnson, 2 of his chosen few are in that footage there. And we know that already, as you say, they were already pictured. Ben Hallett, I think his name was, and Sean Bailey, Ben Mallet, forgive me, and Sean Bailey. But it does beg the question, should somebody who's visibly seen to be flouting the rules, the police are now looking at this, we know the implications of Partygate on Boris Johnson's downfall and now all of this, should they be honoured with a life peerage?
Well, there are legitimate questions about that. What I would point out is that a lot of the people on the list, some of whom, as you say, appear in this video, of course, this party was known about when the list was put together, when they were vetted. Even though a former Prime Minister can put forward people, the civil servants still have to vet them. And if officials felt at that time that they were OK to go on the list, then I think it follows that they're OK to remain on it. Of course, there were other civil servants who were on the honours list who were also caught up in parties during Partygate as well. I think we are getting to the stage now where we need to draw a line under this. Shouldn't there be, I think you said earlier, Eamonn, some kind of amnesty?
Is that controversial to say that? I mean, you know, I didn't lose anybody in the pandemic. I mean, I have people who've probably got lasting effects of consequences of contracting COVID. But I do think that we get to a point and we say, right, you were all bad, you were all naughty, you all shouldn't have, and I don't personally approve of this, but I don't want to, in 5 years from now, 7 years from now, say, new evidence was unearthed that so-and-so, Alex Crowley, was there at this party and he should hang for this, basically.
Yeah, you know... and
been there, done it, forget it.
This is it. And look, everyone can agree that it was the wrong thing to do and that it was an insult to all those people who couldn't see loved ones, etc. OK, we all accept that. But, as you said, are we going to look at, in a couple of years' time, where were you on that day? Did you have some birthday
Isn't it a
cake?
statute of limitations?
Well, indeed.
But it stops us talking about the other things that are facing the country, real crises that are affecting people today. And we know that people are really, really worried about their mortgages. This has knock-ons as well for people in the rental sector because landlords then end up putting up rents as well. Are we about to have a housing crisis, even more of a housing crisis in this country?
Well, I mean, we have a housing crisis.
Mortgage crisis.
The mortgage crisis is upon us. Already, people who were renewing deals in January and February felt that pain, and now it looks like we're going to get another round of it. It is somewhat a consequence of probably 10 to 15 years plus of housing policy in this country that has simply not built enough homes. And because we've not built enough homes, all of these problems are always exacerbated.
That has to be squarely on the shoulders of the Tories. I mean, Michael Gove, who everybody talks about being an incredibly effective politician, has not been able to effect change to this housing crisis, which he's wanted to do. I mean, it is a failing of the Tory government.
Unfortunately, the actual policy of the government at the moment is to build less homes. That is the practical effect of their policy, and that needs to change.
Yeah, and then we've got, you know, this teaching, the medical strikes go on. We've got more teaching strikes going on, and we're going to be talking very shortly about what children are taught and why it is the responsibility of teachers. I mean, I am quite pro-teachers in this whole situation, that I just don't think you can carry on and keep saying we've made a fair offer and whatever. I think you've got to value the profession. Apparently 10% of the whole profession resigned last year, walked away from what should be a vocation. And it's obviously not. But we're talking about sex education, aren't we, shortly? And some of the stuff you look at and you think, really, of all the things teachers have to do they have to be on the ball with this? Is it their responsibility? Is it parents' responsibility? The thing is, actually, I'm not in a situation where I have to deal with it. You will be in a situation where you have
well, the question on that debate is whether or not parents should be privy to what's being taught. And I absolutely think parents should be allowed to know. And if they have a problem with it, then they can pull their kids out. I don't think they should dictate the curriculum, but if they don't want their children having explicit and graphic detail about certain things, I think it's fair enough. They're their children. That would be my view.
Alex, always a pleasure talking to you, my friend. Really appreciate you getting up out of bed and speaking to us. So thank you, and looking so smart. always as well.
I do like the very pale pink.
make an
Very
effort.
pretty. Well,
Thank you.
Phrase. Handsome. Anyway,
Thank you very much indeed.
moving on.
Drink driving. We're talking about speed cameras. We're talking about radar guns. We're talking about all these things. And the reason we are is that speeding offences have hit new highs, according to data from the Automobile Association.
Yeah, almost 500,000 drivers have ended up in the dock in 2020 accused of speeding. That's the highest figure since records began.
Easy pickings, I would say. Easy pickings, except if you come up against criminal lawyer Nick Freeman.
A.K.A. Mr. Loophole.
Who can pick some of this stuff apart. Mick, forgive our cynicism, but you see it from the sharp end. Do you have suspicions like us that this is simply a revenue collector for local authorities?
In part, yes. Can I just say, I think it's 250,000, not 500,000. But absolutely, there's probably about 500,000 people ending up in court charged with a different variety of offences. But in terms of speeding, it's about 250,000, which is a massive number. Nevertheless, it's the highest number, I think, since records have begun, and this was last year. I think one of the big problems is in London, particularly, and in other cities, the 20 mile an hour speed limit is causing huge problems. Because it's artificially low in most circumstances. And, if I drive down to London regularly, you come off the M1, you get onto the Edgware Road, and there's a slight decline, and you're constantly braking, because the car actually doesn't want to stay at 20 miles an hour. So I'm not advocating against having a 20 mile an hour limit when there's a good reason for it, school opening and closing time, etc. But just having blanket 20 mile an hour speed limits across the city, I think the mayor wants to extend it to 137 miles by 2025. Other cities are following suit. And what is the point? And in my view, the statistics, the research shows there's no real improvement in terms of safety. And so many people who have never been done for speeding before, never committed an offence, are falling foul of this because it's counterintuitive. It's very, very hard to stay at 20 on a fairly empty road, particularly when you're dealing with most cars are now automatic. You've not got the manual change that will break a car. It's very difficult. And it doesn't really make a great deal of sense. So I don't think this is a situation where people are willfully trying to flout the law. I think it's people are innocently falling into the trap because it's artificially low.
And you asked the question, well, what is the point? There's no evidence to show that it actually improves safety. The point is it's a cash cow, isn't it?
I wouldn't argue against that at all. I mean, it's a huge source of revenue for councils who are really struggling financially. And most motorists, when they receive a notice saying, you've gone through a camera, they look at the fine, they look at what happens if they don't pay it within a certain short time period. They've got the option of going to court, and most motorists decide, actually, I'm just going to roll over, I'm going to try and be more careful next time, and they have points on their licence. They get a fixed penalty if they've done a course within the past unless they've done a course within the past 3 years. They just want to get on with their lives. But it's unfortunate because it's criminalising people who have no real intent on committing offences. These are not people who are, putting their foot down and driving in a deliberate, dangerous manner. And that's a completely different situation. There's a tiny minority. And obviously, when those appear before the court, they're dealt with not for speeding, but for dangerous driving and other associated offences.
I would take it as a personal insult. I've never had a speeding fine in my life, and if I was, I would see it as defeat. I would be really angry with myself with all of this. Yeah. Do you think there's any way, Nick, that you could reform the system, or would you suggest a way that maybe we should be, the education side of it should be brought in before the penalty side of it? What do you think?
I think there are a lot of things that could be done. I think education is always worthwhile, and these speed awareness courses are really useful. I mean, if you think about it, Eamonn, we familiarise ourselves with the highway code when we're 17 or 18 when we're going to take a test, and probably again when we're about 70 when we reapply for our licence. So for me, I would like to see some form of test every 10 years, and not a difficult test, but so that we show we're completely familiar. And in relation to that test, it wouldn't just be about highway code, but it would remind us about certain things that we need to do when we're driving. I also think that speed limits need to be revised. I think someone needs to get hold of this and say, look, in certain times, yes, we need a 20 mile an hour speed limit. but maybe a default position in city centres of 25 miles an hour is more sensible. And then on motorways, when the traffic is light and when certain conditions prevail, it needs to be faster than 70. That again is artificially too slow, and people are falling foul of that because it doesn't make sense if you're travelling on an empty motorway in a car that will go at a considerable speed quite safely to sit at 70 miles an hour. It's ridiculously slow speed. So there are all sorts of things that can be done. I do also think that the presence of police on the road would help. But when in the olden days, when you used to get stopped and the police would give you a sort of a warning, you drive away chastened and you take that on board and hopefully you drive a bit slower. Now it's all robotical. There's no personal involvement. So the system, I don't think, is improved. It's simply raised a lot more money and an awful lot more people are coming before the courts. Which shows that it's not working. It shows that it's not working because I don't believe for 1 second that we're more hell-bent on committing offences and throwing our money away, having higher insurance premiums and having points on our licence. It's a system that's wrong.
And it's revenue for the councils, but then it's an expense to the justice system. We know how overwhelmed the criminal system is, and it's a total waste of time and money, taxpayers' money as well. Nick Freeman, we've got to leave it there. Criminal lawyer, thank you so much for giving us your take on all of that. And if at home you think you've been unfairly given a speeding ticket or ended up in court, we'd love to hear your stories in all of that.
So the police officer said to you, Madam, do you really want to be arguing this with me? And then what did you think?
And that changed my tune very quickly. I wasn't disrespectful, I was very polite, but it was 3 lanes of traffic and it travels down from national speed limit to 30 because it's right next to Twickenham Stadium, and I think at some points it becomes very busy and congested, but it was 3 a.m, there wasn't a single car on the road. And it just was counterintuitive. It didn't occur to me that I would need to drive at 30 miles an hour.
At that time.
And he stopped me and corrected me, which was absolutely the law. But I just thought, really? Is this the best use of your time? And he was like, is this the best way to respond to a police officer? So I changed my tune and I learnt my lesson. I was chastened, to use the words of Nick Freeman then. I never did it again.
Very argumentative.
Yes, I'll always stand up for myself.
If I was a police officer, I would be constantly issuing you with tickets.
Well, you'd be in jail if I was in charge.
Well,
to quote Donald Trump, when he was like, you'd be in jail.
You'd love to get me in handcuffs, wouldn't you? Yes,
gosh.
I could just imagine. 18 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The Home Secretary has urged police chiefs across England and Wales to ramp up the use of stop and search powers. Suella Braverman said officers who use these powers have her full support. However, critics of stop and search say it is disproportionately targeting black and ethnic minority communities. Your views very welcome.
Strikes within the healthcare system have resulted in over 500,000 NHS appointments, operations and procedures being postponed in England. Industrial action began towards the end of last year in the bitter dispute over NHS pay.
New research shows employment for those over the age of 65 has reached a record high of 1.5 million. The group says it's driven by different factors, including an ageing population, increases to pension age and the cost of living crisis. See, I have no desire to be retired. Then the more you see there is a change in attitude, the way people look at you. You're how old? They think you shouldn't be working. A lot of people my age, 47, would just feel they're active and well, I'm not physically active. But
living a full life.
But yes, I mean, I'm compos mentis and, you want to be involved and you're defined by what you do. You don't want to be sitting at home all day watching Loose Women, do you?
No, but I do look back to the days of my grandparents who had a terrible war, a difficult period in the aftermath of that, and they were never better off than when they retired at 60. And then they had a wonderful retirement, and they always had tans, they were in their garden, they were in societies, they
must
travelled.
Have planned well for their...
No, they were never... they would live modestly, but they had a really happy retirement. And as a child, I really remember thinking, wow, to be retired must be amazing. But it won't be like that for us. I'll still be working when I'm 100.
Absolutely right. These are terrible times, and my heart genuinely goes out to people who find themselves on a fixed budget and they've saved up and they've got a mortgage, and and that mortgage may be increasing by hundreds of pounds per month come Thursday. And what money tree do you get this from? It's really incredible. Have you found ways to raise money? Have you found ways you think I can sell off stuff, or I can, things that you wouldn't have considered doing before, but you do now?
Yeah.
And if you were 65, what sort of job would you do? You've got a wealth of experience, and yet you'd be treated like as if, you'll only be given menial jobs, probably, for all of that sort of thing. But let us know what you think. Always welcome. gbviews at gbnews.com. Now, after the next item.
Yes.
After the word I'm not allowed to say.
Yes, not allowed to say. Yeah. Not for Ofcom reasons.
Very shortly. Very shortly.
Very shortly, we're going to be discussing issues that might affect your children or your grandchildren, whether they should be taught explicit material in schools, how much say should the parents and grandparents have in all of this. That's next.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back at 7:25. Still to come on today's programme.
as the first order of the Garter procession takes place since the death of the late Queen. At 7:45, we'll be discussing the King banning Prince Andrew from attending this.
8:20 after a British Airways flight was forced to turn back after severe turbulence left one crew member requiring surgery. We'll be asking why the phenomenon's on the rise and if we'll all have to get used to these bumpier flights. Really frightening stuff.
Okay. And if you've got a tale to tell about turbulence, please do let us know. Mel says the best message we had from a pilot when flying near the Himalayas was, ladies and gentlemen, we're just going through some air potholes, but our suspension is a lot stronger than any car, so please don't worry.
I quite like it. GB Views at gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
Okay,
about sex education.
Let's talk about sex, baby. Isn't that a song? Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about goodness knows what. Anyway, children may be being taught too much. This is explicit content at school before they even reach puberty.
And while some argue kids need to be taught about sex and relationships so that they can make informed decisions later on in life, others think it should be up to the parents rather than the teachers. So today we're asking, has sex ed gone too far?
OK, columnist Caroline Farrow from the Catholic Universe Weekly says sexual libertines want to disempower and destabilise families and replace old-fashioned values. Meanwhile,
dating blogger Gaynor Evans believes sex ed can only enhance a child's well-being when in school. Gaynor, I just want to start by asking you, because a lot of the language, the content that these kids are going to be taught is so graphic that we're not actually allowed to describe it pre-watershed. So how can something that can't be said pre-watershed to adults on the television be appropriate to be telling to our young people?
Yeah, I must admit, I've read through the document and I didn't know some of the words, so I was a bit confused myself. But I think these are words that they are familiar with. I mean, the fact that I didn't understand one or two of the words and had to look them up was quite sort of funny, really. But I just think that this is dialogue that they actually are using or coming across in their everyday lives. And if they don't understand it, at least if they've got the sort of somebody telling them what it is in an informed environment where they can ask questions freely and aren't embarrassed, I think it's important that they then know, because they may be these words might be totally inappropriately being used and they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know they were totally inappropriate. So I think knowledge is never a bad thing. It's just got to be given in the right environment, I would say.
Yeah, and maybe, Caroline Farrow, by the right people. I often think about this and say you're teaching geography one moment and then you're expected to talk about all sorts of intimacies the next. I don't think that does the teacher any favours or carries maybe the air of authenticity that it should. What do you think about who teaches it and how they teach it? Because when I was at school of the same religion as you, everything was in a moral framework. Now, I can't say that I emerged from school with anything. There was quite a lot of the morality stuck with me, but there wasn't anything about the science of everything else. So how do you, Caroline, are you totally against any sex education being taught, or how would you perceive it if you were a teacher? How would you perceive it being taught?
Well, this is the issue that is making a lot of lobby groups a lot of money that you identified, Eamonn, because teachers rightly, specialist subject teachers, you're teaching French or teaching geography, whatever, of course they don't want to be teaching this and they feel very sort of disempowered. So, of course, what do we have to do? We have to pay the specialist lobby groups to come in because only they can deliver the training. Now, nobody is arguing, not even me, that children shouldn't be taught facts about reproduction, about their changing bodies, about contraception even. But it's impossible, really, whichever way you teach this, there's always going to be some sort of moral framework, whether that's from, say, a Catholic or Christian perspective, or whether, even saying I'm going to teach this from an entirely neutral stance is still an ideological point of view. But actually what we're seeing is that children are being taught inappropriate material. Now, I disagree with what your other speaker says about these are words that children are using already. They're not. I know from my own children who are, exactly of this sort of age, that they're finding graphics. Fortunately, they don't have too much of it, but they don't want graphic sex eds. They hate sex ed lessons. They find them embarrassing, humiliating, and actually it's not giving children the information that they need to know that's appropriate to their age and stage. So nobody's saying don't tell children things. Of course, children need to learn about puberty. They need to know about their changing bodies, but there's a lot more beyond sort of mechanical sex acts. And this is what children are being taught, sort of, you do A to get B. And it's actually ruining children's chances of having a healthy sex life later, because it's clinicalizing everything. It's turning it into a sort of a mechanical act. It's really sort of de-eroticizing the whole process of sex in a way. And sex should be something that, two people in a loving, supportive relationship, perhaps learn about together, what you like and dislike, rather than this whole heap of expectation being placed on children that they can't contextualize. And, I think it really runs the risk as well of sexualizing children and making them ripe for exploitation and grooming. So, I've heard of 11-year-olds being taught of the importance of postcoital hygiene, for example. And 11-year-olds told, you must always wash after sex. They don't need to know that. Likewise, girls and boys don't talk about specific acts.
Well, I just want to bring Gaynor back in. I don't know if I detected an eye roll there. A little bit of disagreement from you.
I think that, it's all very well to say that they would have their first sexual experience in a loving relationship and it would all be very, sort of kind and nice. But sometimes the reality is that isn't what isn't actually what's happening out there. So I think sex can form all different forms of relationships. I think it can bond a relationship that's already established, but sometimes, especially in this young age group, and I don't know what age group you're talking about there, but with the sort of whether it's the teenagers or the junior age, I know you can opt out of the junior. If you're a parent that doesn't want them to have this education, you can actually say that you don't want your child included in that.
Yeah, although you say that, there's been this high-profile case recently about a mother who was refused information about what her children were being taught. And I think most parents would see that as actually quite alarming. I'm not pretending that I know everything or I'm better qualified to teach it, but I think as the parent of that child under 18, I think I'd like to know what they're being taught. I certainly don't know a lot of this stuff, let me tell you.
Another thing as well,
the parents should be included.
So again, I was just going to say that I went to single-sex school. It was embarrassing then. If I was in a mixed school...
How mortifying, yeah.
I would think so. You did go to a mixed school?
I went to mixed school just for sixth form. That's a whole other debate. Single-sex schools, I was a bit boy mad because I'd been in a girls' school for ages. But anyway, but Gaynor, you think parents should be allowed to know, but why are they being denied this kind of information? Surely, if we believe in education, parents are entitled to be educated about what their children are learning as well.
There could be the what's the word I'm looking for? Politicization of a biological matter. That's the sort of thing, Caroline, that would get me.
And this isn't new, okay? So in 2020, Warwickshire Council had to pull a programme which was teaching 6-year-olds about, how to sort of touch themselves. Sorry, I'm very aware of Ofcom. Yeah, in 2020, Warwickshire Council were forced to pull a very controversial programme called All About Me, which was teaching 6-year-olds about masturbation. And this is the problem, is that children are being really sexualised, they're being taught inappropriate material, and they're also being sort of radicalised with this gender ideology, the idea that sex is something that you can choose. They're being given very regressive ideas as well about, boys like this, girls like that. So if you don't fit into your sort of boy-girl label, then, maybe you've been born in the wrong body. And parents are really, really objecting to this. Nobody is saying that you shouldn't teach children things in an age-appropriate way, but actually parents need to take back the power. And also, I think this also shows that until this gets sorted out, there's a big government review going on about guidelines. We need to scrap sex ed in schools, and we need to reinstate the right of all parents to withdraw their children. Now, by scrap sex ed, I don't mean not teach children about reproduction.
It's scrapping it all together.
But
actually, make a final point to Gaynor. I mean, I think we may not like the world we live in, but we are where we are. And I have a 5-year-old daughter. She came home from school talking about the Pantosaurus. They'd been taught about their underwear and who it was appropriate for them to see their pants.
Yes.
And now whenever we go to the beach, she said, but they're going to see my... And I was so sad because suddenly there was a loss of innocence and that we had to teach our children this. But then I thought, well, I'd rather she knew that actually, you know, her pants are just private parts, and this is not... But it's a horrible world sometimes that we live in, but, you know, knowledge is power, isn't it, Gaynor?
That's what I think, knowledge is power. I do agree the parents should be brought into this. It should be a guided thing. When the child expresses a need to know something, the question should be answered. But unfortunately, not all children develop at the same age and the same level. And my only concern with this is that you might have a very emotionally immature child and a mature child, and this could miss both of them in this if we decide not to do it, or if we decide to give them too much information. It might not be right for the more emotionally immature child. So it's a difficult one, which only parents can help with, I think, in that case.
Gaynor, thanks for your take on things. Caroline, thank you very much indeed. You've opened the debate up there. People get in touch. You know how to do it. gbviews@gbnews.com. Please let us know what you think.
Stay with us. We're going to be discussing the scrapped mortgage relief fund for struggling homeowners, going through the papers with Biggins and Emily Carver after this.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
19 minutes before 8 o'clock. Eamonn and Isabel at breakfast.
We're just getting rid of a sex education from Biggins there. Never mind in the classroom. We're joined for the pay-per-view with Christopher Biggins and Emily Carver. And Emily, you want to start by talking about mortgages. Look, it's a big news at the moment, isn't it? All the stress around this. And actually, mortgage relief is being ruled out at the moment because the fear it could drive inflation.
Yes, millions of people are obviously worried about further interest rate rises is what we've been told to expect this Thursday from the Bank of England. People may not be able to afford their mortgages, but the government is saying, they've been asked, are you going to help people with mortgages? Are you going to give them some money? Are you going to give them some relief? They've said we're not going to have some kind of relief fund because it would exacerbate, as you said, exacerbate inflation because the government taking on more debt, that puts up the pressure to raise interest rates even further. They need to get inflation down first, and that's their priority. It's difficult for them to control inflation, but I agree with the government that this would not be the right way to do it. They are saying, though, that they're going to talk to the banks about maybe more payment holidays, different ways in which the banks might be able to help people. But again, I'm not sure how much they can actually do to persuade banks to take on more risk and allow people to have mortgage holidays. And also think of the renters as well. You know?
Yeah, well, exactly. It affects everyone, whether you're a landowner, a tenant, or a landlord. But the question of whether the Bank of England should be pausing a rate rise as well, I think, is controversial if that's coming from the Treasury, because they're supposed to be independent. And Alex Crowley, our guest earlier, was saying, well, let's not pretend this isn't a political decision that the Bank of England's making. It affects all of our lives. They're doing it for political reasons, but it should be separate, don't you think?
I think it should be separate. I think it's very difficult for the Bank of England because they said, oh, inflation's only going to be transitory, no worries, don't worry about it. And then, of course, it's been very, very, very persistent, and they're being accused of being too slow to begin with in raising interest rates, and now they're having to raise them further and further and further. But the economists I've been listening to have said that perhaps they should keep them, hold them at this rate for a little bit longer, see what's happening. People are saying that inflationary pressures are coming down. So hold your horses, don't raise it again because it's so painful for people, but it does look like they are going to.
Just gauging reaction on this, Paul says we don't have a housing problem, we just have too many people. The tragedy of all of this in real terms, Elaine says, my daughter and her two grandchildren, so his daughter or daughter's children, have been sleeping in my one-bedroom bungalow for 2 years in Birmingham due to the landlord selling. Duncan says if the government mandated that all new housing had solar collectors fitted, that would kill two birds with one stone. So it goes on, but I just think it's very frightening, very scary, Biggins, for anybody who finds themselves on a fixed wage and haven't got the ability to dip into savings or to work harder and get overtime.
It's criminal. I mean, I think it's absolutely outrageous. I mean, you know, people are suffering. Left, right and centre, and I don't think it's right at all.
Is it right that a male actor should play a female part? And this was an interview with Sir Mark Rylance, which I did see yesterday on the Laura Kunsberg programme. He said he doubts he will play the part of a woman again. Now, as a man who regularly plays the parts of a women, yes,
I do. I think what the trouble is, I admire Mark Rylance enormously. He's a brilliant actor, and this headline in the Daily Telegraph is politically correct theatre is dull, and I couldn't agree more with him. Acting is about acting. Now, Michael Sheen says that...
Welsh accents.
Welsh accents. Now, acting is acting. You don't have to be from anywhere or any colour or any race. You are performing a part, and that should be taken into consideration.
Well, it's so old-fashioned, Christopher. You have to be exactly the same identity as the person you play these days.
I know, but that is ridiculous. I mean,
Straight person can't play a gay person.
No, it's a
man
joke.
can't play a woman, whatever next.
I know.
But you know what's interesting? Andrew Lloyd Webber was in the papers yesterday because he was saying that political correctness had got in the way of a new musical he wanted to put on. It wasn't sexist, racist, homophobic or whatever. It was because it was set in a different country from Britain, and therefore he wouldn't understand the country. So he's saying that he was told he shouldn't put on this play because, as a British person, you shouldn't have a play that's set in another country. I mean, absurd. So more and more of these people are coming out, aren't they?
Well, I think, and what is annoying about it is they're forgetting talent. And talent can do anything, I think, within reason. And they may make mistakes, but that's fine if they make mistakes. Then you can say, what a terrible Welshman he created, for that television role or that theatre role. I mean, it's really... And, of course, the other thing that Mark said, we are not encouraging eccentrics anymore. In my early days, there were wonderful John Gielgud, Ralph Richardson, Edith Evans, all these wonderful actors who were mad as hatters. And they were wonderful characters. And we don't have them anymore. I mean, we've still got Maggie Smith, thank goodness.
But Rylance said yesterday in that interview, if you were different, directors like to be like football managers. I tell you to do this, you do that. That's all I want you to do. Don't want your contribution. Do it the way I say. And it comes down to this ego thing, where the actual talent is. Is it a collaboration, or is it the director will often think they are the talent? I've never really gone to watch a film because of who directed it, but
people are in it.
Yeah,
the people who are in it.
A film that's been directed by someone I like, it's usually because I think it will be cinematographically beautiful. Huge sort of...
Gosh, Isabel,
pictures.
Cinematography, beautiful. Biggins, I watched a film at the weekend starring Bill Nighy called Living. And it's about a man who's got 6 months left to live, and it sounds very depressing. It's not. It was completely uplifting, but it was stylistically absolutely beautiful. I'd recommend it to anybody.
All right, go and watch it.
Living.
But picking up on the acting point, it is nuanced, because we probably do all balk at the idea of somebody blacking up, for example, and you would probably say if it's a black character, a black person should play it.
Right,
so
okay,
why
well, how
do we
come
then
you have a black version of Elizabeth I?
No,
which Channel 4, I totally get what you're saying, but yet you can do it the other way about. You can have a black person playing a white part.
Yeah, it's very weird, but I think there are inconsistencies in our view of it all. But I do think, straight people should be able to play gay roles, and I don't know why it's acting, but we don't necessarily think it's right for somebody who's white to dress up as black.
Gave a famous Othello. And that you could never go anywhere near that nowadays. I mean, the idea of someone blacking up to play a performance is absolutely out of it. No, I mean, what you're saying, though, Eamonn, was that the black people do play these characters in history, which was totally wrong.
Yeah, the other way around.
Good, OK. Emily, what do you want to finish talking about? Up to you.
Should we go for the Great Beer Robbery?
Yes.
It's a fun one, although it's actually a bit... Well, it's not that fun, really.
No, it's theft.
Breweries are purposefully reducing the alcohol content of their beers to avoid paying tax, and we're being asked to pay the same price for the pint. So it's the Great Beer Robbery.
They're calling it drinkflation.
Drinkflation crisis. So you're getting less bang for your buck, less alcohol for your money. But I do understand the breweries do want to pay less tax because they've been hit so hard by the pandemic, supply chains, etc., etc.
They are taxed on the alcoholic strength, and the breweries reckon they'll save around £250 million on duty payments to the government. So... I'm not a drinker, but for any of you who are, would it make much of a difference the alcohol content dropping from 4% to 3.7%. Do you think it would make any difference?
I think to some people it would, but I'm not a beer drinker.
I'm not a beer drinker.
If you took it out of my wine, I think it would change the taste.
Yeah.
I think it would change it for
and
the worse.
relaxation of it.
It's funny how they're trying to spin it as it's because people are more health conscious.
OK, we'll raise a glass to that. Thank you both very much indeed. See you again in 40 minutes' time. Now, Prince Andrew, he is not going to today's Order of the Garter procession.
Yeah, the Duke of York was barred from taking part in the ceremony last year after Charles intervened at the last minute. But he was allowed to wear the Garter robes at the coronation last year. OK, let's find out more about all of this, the latest royal drama, from Ingrid Seward, Editor-in-Chief of Majesty magazine. Your Highness, a very good morning to you. Lovely to see. She is regal looking, isn't she? She's very regal. Yes. Ingrid, the thing about this is I get the impression Andrew is desperate to have some official role, and it seems to be that the palace are desperate for him not to have any role. Do you have any sympathy for Andrew on this?
I do have sympathy for Andrew, not because of what he's done or hasn't done, or whether he's innocent or guilty, but for anyone that's had their entire... Remember, he's never known anything else except military and royal, and he's not adaptable, he's not popular, and therefore he hasn't been able to find anything else in his life as far as we know. So he's really is in a gilded cage and unable really to do anything. And I do have a smidgen of sympathy for him. I know he's behaved completely wrongly, whether he's innocent or not. He's never apologized to those women, and I think he just doesn't understand what he's done. So I think he's completely lost, and I'm sure he's probably very, very depressed, especially seeing all his family riding at the trooping on Saturday, when only a few years before he was doing the same thing.
But Ingrid, a lot of people just say he's so entitled. I mean, this is a man, it's a gilded cage, as you describe. He's photographed, isn't he, out riding at the weekend in Windsor Great Park. He's spotted up in the Highlands of Scotland with various people. He's still living a life in private. He just doesn't get to have this sort of worship that many of the other royals have in public life. And quite right, a lot of people would say.
Yes, I quite agree with that. But just to think of the personality, this is all he's ever known. If he was suddenly ripped off the television screens and thrown somewhere else, and that's all you'd ever known, it would be very difficult for you. And Andrew is very entitled, and this is part of his problem. But I still think that when, not to be able to do this, I mean, he will be at the Garter lunch. He will be there in the Waterloo Chamber today. But I think Charles is actually protecting him, because if he walked down the castle to St George's Chapel in the Garter ceremony today, I mean, he could be booed. It would just not look right. So he cannot be seen, but he's still there. It's really up to Andrew, has to find some sort of life for himself.
Do you think he's miserable?
I think he's very miserable. He doesn't have the inner resources that perhaps other people I just always think of the Profumo scandal, and how, because I watched it on television quite recently, and how John Profumo actually went and did huge charity work very, very quietly to kind of redeem himself to himself. But we haven't seen Andrew do anything. So I think he needs to have some focus to his life.
So today he will not be in the procession. He will, though, be at the lunch.
He was at the lunch last year, and I presume he will be there, because, I mean, King Charles is not an unkind brother. He doesn't want to completely banish Andrew from doing anything, but he doesn't want Andrew to be visible. I think that is the point, and that is for the sake of the monarchy as well as anything else.
And you suspect, don't you, or one suspects that, you know, he's missing his mother because he was the favourite, and that's just simply not the case with his brother, although, as you say, he's not an unkind brother, still trying to protect him, but he's not the favourite anymore. Ingrid, we have to leave it there. We're out of time. Really good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Ingrid Seward from
Thank you.
Magazine there. Stay with us. We'll have the latest on the police's examination of the new Partygate video footage as the Prime Minister prepares to skip a vote on Boris Johnson's future later today.
But first, Jonathan Vautry has your Monday morning forecast.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's generally a showery picture as we start off the new working week. It's all due to low pressure that is in control of the weather across the UK, bringing unsettled conditions, particularly so for Scotland first thing. This occluded front has been pushing its way northwards overnight, bringing some heavy rain, and there is a rain warning in force until 12 o'clock today. Could be some surface water issues until that eventually clears. Will be quite breezy across the northeast as well throughout this morning. A drier start to the day elsewhere, but into the afternoon the sunshine is strong and it will help develop some showers. They could be locally heavy with some thunderstorms, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland and maybe southern Scotland later on. Generally further towards the south and east, staying drier with some sunshine, and in that sunshine climbing to highs of 25 or 26 degrees Celsius. As we head into the evening, there'll be some late sunshine for many of us, and the showers will gradually ease their way off, taking longest for parts of the north and west. But clear spells developing overnight. Might see some isolated mist and fog patches forming underneath those clear skies. Remaining quite humid for many of us, particularly across southeastern areas of England as we feed in this cloud and rain from the continent. Temperatures holding up around 14-15 degrees Celsius, but might drop into single figures in some rural areas. Throughout Tuesday then, we are watching this area of heavy rain push up from the south. There is still uncertainty in regards to the exact details and track of this, so do stay up to date with the forecast, but it could bring some torrential downpours of rain with some thunderstorms as well. Whilst it'll be a drier start for Scotland and Northern Ireland, again, heavy showers and thunderstorms could develop into the afternoon, and some surface water issues are possible. Temperatures, if you see some of the sunshine, climb to highs in the low or mid-20s. So we head towards the middle part of the week. High pressure is wanting to reclaim control, so the showers will generally become fewer and less intense as we head towards Thursday, and it'll also be that little bit less humid. Bye-bye.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
MPs prepare to vote on Boris Johnson's future as police examine new Partygate video footage.
Good morning. It's just after 8 o'clock on Monday, the 19th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And leading our news on this Monday morning, the Prime Minister will skip the vote today on the report that found Boris Johnson lied to Parliament. MPs will debate the findings, which could see Mr Johnson barred from holding a parliamentary pass.
It comes as the Metropolitan Police say it's considering new footage that shows a party at Conservative HQ during lockdown. The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove has apologised for the video, calling it indefensible.
The Treasury has ruled out helping those struggling with higher mortgage bills, saying it risks fuelling further inflation. That comes amid predictions that the Bank of England will raise interest rates for the 13th consecutive time later this week.
Ministers are considering prioritising British citizens when it comes to access to social housing. The move could be included in the King's speech in the autumn in a bid to tackle concerns around migration.
Ramp up stop and search to prevent violence, says Suella Braverman. The Home Secretary says the dangerous culture of carrying weapons must be brought to a stop as she gives police forces across England and Wales her full backing. But critics say she is unfairly targeting a certain demographic.
And as the weather stays stormy this week, we'll have your latest forecast.
After a thundery end to the weekend, there's a chance of further thunderstorms over the coming few days. I'll have the full forecast a little later on.
To our top story this morning, and MPs will today debate the damning report that found Boris Johnson to have deliberately misled Parliament, with the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet predicted to skip the vote.
I've just been attacked by a fly.
Oh, no.
Do you know where it hit me?
Back of the throat.
No, right bang into my eye.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
But I'm going to carry on.
Yeah, well, I can see it now. It's floating around.
It's kind of... Why do they have... Some of these flies have such energy. Do you know...
For such small little things.
Have you ever wondered... You see, I don't know if you can see that we've got little lamps above us here. I don't know, Director, if you can show these. I just cut these up, show what we've got here. No, shouldn't have asked for that. But anyway, but if you notice at home, you've got a lampshade in the centre.
Bad at the lights. Don't do that. Yeah.
Why do flies fly triangularly under those?
Don't
Do you ever,
know.
they fly under them. Olivia's knowing what I'm saying here. Do you know where they fly? She looks at me as if I'm mad. But, you watch a fly over, like, say, a dining table, and they go like a triangle under a light.
Yeah.
They fix themselves.
Stop making me look at the lights.
Okay, stop looking at that.
Losing my retinas.
While Isabel has a fit, I will tell you that this was the Home Secretary, wasn't it?
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister speaking on a visit to a hospital last night. Was that a professional visit or a personal visit?
Professional visit.
Right. Just did he come all over with something
No, I
or
think
whatever?
he's fit as a fiddle.
Right, OK. So Rishi Sunak said this was a matter for members of Parliament to decide. Last time I looked, he's a member of Parliament, but he's still not turning up.
This committee was established under the former Prime Minister. It commanded the confidence of the House at the time, and I'm sure that they've done their work thoroughly, and I respect them for that. Obviously, this is a matter for the House, not for the government, and that's why each and individual colleagues will make up their own mind when the time comes.
So are you not going to be there?
I said each and individual colleague will make up their own mind when the time comes. This is a matter for the House rather than for the government. It's an important distinction, and that's why I wouldn't want to influence anyone in advance of that vote.
Truth is, it's just very, very difficult for him to sort of take a view on it. You know,
Yeah.
But if he votes in favour of it, that alienates a huge part of his party and creates a headache for him. But he can't say that.
And do you have to know how he voted? Is that vote private?
Yeah,
or?
no, I don't think it would be a private vote. Olivia will tell us. Let's just talk about this police footage, because the new footage of this lockdown party that we already knew about, but it's new footage, is now to be considered by the Metropolitan Police. So let's first of all talk about that vote then, Olivia. Why do you think it would be that the Prime Minister won't be there?
Well, the Prime Minister obviously wants to avoid the vote. There are plenty of Conservatives Conservative Party members and just Conservative voters who still really like Boris Johnson. He is more popular than Rishi Sunak among Conservative voters, according to the Times today, although Rishi Sunak is more popular overall. But, of course, if he voted to keep Boris Johnson, to disallow the Parliament report, then there would be all sorts of pressure on him from Labour, saying that it's incredibly weak of him and that this is a disgraced Prime Minister, and there's the chance, of course, that he'd alienate people who don't like Boris Johnson, of which there are quite a lot. So it sounds as though Rishi Sunak is going to instead be meeting the Swedish Prime Minister today. Rather useful that he's visiting today. That hasn't been confirmed. It's going to be confirmed later this morning, but the Swedes seem very confident that Rishi Sunak is going to be meeting their Prime Minister. That said, it now looks quite possible that this isn't even going to go to a vote.
Right, OK.
There's going to be a one-line whip today, which means that MPs can make up their own minds about whether or not to be there. Lots of them have decided to go and campaign in Uxbridge. The Prime Minister is sort of implicitly hoping that lots of people will go to Uxbridge. And
the constituency of Boris Johnson.
Exactly, where there's now going to be a by-election. And it sounds as though the government is pretty much encouraging MPs to go over there. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson, possibly for fear of a very embarrassing show in this vote, has actually called his own supporters to stand down. There are a group of die-hard Boris Johnson loyalists who were saying that they were going to make a lot of noise in the House of Commons and disallow the vote against the report. But he's actually told them now to back off. Bill Cash, apparently, is going to shout no when the Speaker puts the motion on whether or not to vote in favour of this report. Bill Cash will shout no. But almost everyone else who's there, and it doesn't sound like there'll be many Conservatives there, will probably say yes, which means that the Speaker won't even need to put it to a full vote.
Yeah.
So it feels as though Boris Johnson's career in the end might end with a whimper rather than a bang.
Interesting. Olivia, thank you very much indeed for that. We'll speak again later in the programme and react, hopefully, to what you've talked about there. GBviews at gbnews.com would be excellent if you did get in touch. Right, so the Prime Minister mightn't be attending that vote today, but Labour will. Let's speak to the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. Jonathan, good morning. Jonathan is the Shadow Business Secretary. Why do you think it is important to be there and to register a vote?
Well, good morning. Yes, I mean, look, this is a very significant report in parliamentary history. I mean, I read it at the weekend. To be honest, I've never really read anything quite like it in terms of how it is making a robust defence, really, of parliamentary democracy and saying Boris Johnson has fallen very much below the minimum standard required. And to be honest, it is so damning and it's forensic. If anyone hasn't read it, I'd say read the summary, the first 8 or 9 pages. I understand over the weekend, to be honest, that no significant dissent is expected towards it, and it will go through on the shout of MPs.
The Labour Party, so presumably if it does go to a vote, the Labour Party will be voting very much in support of the findings of the committee. Rules are important, and it's important that they are followed. With that in mind, and with this report into Sue Gray and her conduct, and having been found to have broken civil service code of conduct as well as her own contract, will Sir Keir Starmer still be employing her as his Chief of Staff?
Yeah, Sue Gray's going to join and be the Chief of Staff. She's been cleared by the process for former civil servants leaving the civil service in the proper fashion. Again, lots of claims, lots of noise from the Conservative Party, no real substance at all to that. Cleared in actually a relatively straightforward process. And I look, to be honest, I've seen these stories over the weekend. Tories attacking other Tory MPs on the committee, Tories attacking civil servants. Even I, as a Member of Parliament, am so tired of this Conservative soap opera. I just read that report because it's going to be parliamentary business today. The case is forensically laid out. It is damning. It is absolutely clear and straightforward and accessible in how it analyses what the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, did and why that was unacceptable. And that's why I'll be accepting the conclusions of that report and voting for it today.
What I think is important, that we shouldn't lose sight as to what political policy is, where we're moving to, what will change in our lives. And today, Labour wants to emphasise an energy policy, which sometimes people are a bit confused as to what Labour's energy policy is. But there's going to be clarity on this today, Jonathan. What is the message you want to get across that equates Labour with energy?
Yeah, absolutely. So no one denies we're living through a cost of living crisis of unprecedented proportions. We've got the cost of energy is at the heart of that, and that is caused by the cost of fossil fuels. So the plan we're launching today, our Clean Power Plan 2030, is to reduce that dependence and therefore look forward to the future and say let's never have the kind of cost of living crisis, the kind of energy crisis which we're living through again. So for our electricity system, that means an entirely clean electricity system, so renewables and nuclear providing the majority of that, backed up with hydrogen and carbon capture, and increasingly in the future battery storage, so that we not only have an energy system which is clean and of course hits those climate objectives, but which is secure, which is better for national security, and which crucially provides the good jobs of the future, because there is no question these will be the industries that will have the greatest potential in future. It's a clear red line between ourselves and the Conservative Party. If people want more of the same, they can have that with the Conservative Party, but if they want some ambition, some real future optimism about not just jobs but national security and energy security and lower bills as a result of that, they can have a look at our plan today that Ed Miliband and Keir Starmer are laying out.
Well, people who will see those plans and will feel worried, though, won't there? These are the plans to get rid of a lot of the planning rules that are in place to protect beautiful places. I mean, is anything off the table? I know that green belt's not off the table anymore. What about beauty spots?
Well, the first thing I'd say is the planning system has to be part of that reform process. So present, it takes on average 13 years from licensing, say, an offshore wind farm to getting it built. Now, that's no good. That's no good for business. That's no good for people who need energy, and it's certainly no good for hitting those big national targets that we have got. So, of course, that can be speeded up. It actually, even a few years ago, it was 5 or 6 years it took, and that wasn't particularly quick. So, of course, there has to be a planning process, but it doesn't have to take 13 years to do it, and that planning process will balance, as you say, areas of outstanding natural beauty in the proper fashion. But let's be clear, you cannot build things in anything like the timescale required in this country, and that's not something that costs money. That's just about having a better process, a more clear and straightforward process to getting that done. Reform of National Grid is a big part of this as well. It takes, if you were going to connect something to National Grid at the minute, you'd probably quoted a connection time in the 2030s. Again, that's absurd. Come on, we can do better than that. And of course, there is an element of expanding offshore and onshore wind that requires not so much public money, but a public guarantee of the minimum price in order to get more of that built. So it's not just about public money or planning or National Grid reform. It's all these things together to deliver that better energy system.
We're on course, it appears, looking at the figures for the first 6 months of the year with boat crossings. We're on course for 20,000 migrant people arriving by boats by the end of the year, and talking about getting things done, and wherever you've got to have accommodation for them, you've got to have houses. Now, here's something which I'm a bit aghast at, that people who live in England in particular will be priority when it comes to council housing lists. I think a lot of people would think, surely they were anyway, and that wasn't the case. What's your view on that?
Well, first of all, I mean, the government promising people priority for houses which don't exist seems fairly ironic to me. Of course, anyone who's even eligible whatsoever for social housing in this country would have already been guaranteed, been promised the right to stay here. They would have satisfied that criteria, and certainly for benefits like universal credit, which have a housing element to them, you can't get those unless you are a British national or someone with permanent residency in this country. So, first of all, I'm not sure what they're promising when they're not building enough houses to begin with. But as to the existing rules, I'm not sure what the difference is that they'd be put forward. So I'm afraid, again, it feels like a headline from the government into the working week here in Parliament with no real substance behind it.
Meanwhile, this mortgage crisis, lots of substance behind worries for that. The Resolution Foundation saying over the weekend that average repayments could go up by £3,000 a year next year. Lots of people looking to renew or change their mortgages at the moment, and those interest rates just going up and up and up. The Treasury have ruled out any kind of relief fund on that. Do you think that's the right thing to do?
Well, it's real pain. I mean, you're absolutely right to say that. My mortgage is up next year, and I compare the market now to the 2%. It's fixed at the moment, and you know, that's a real difference in outgoings. And you know, the start of this, that disastrous Liz Truss mini budget, real pain for people. Now, one of the really difficult things is, of course, that one of the purposes of increasing interest rates is to remove money from the economy as a way to tackle inflation. So if the government reversed that, to be honest, it wouldn't make logical sense. What is the most important thing that is required is, I think, looking at what takes away the longer-term inflationary pressures. And again, this plan on energy is a good example of that. If we're going to remain exposed, hooked on the price of fossil fuels, that's one of the reasons, because we're so exposed to that inflation has been higher in the UK than other countries, even though it is a factor in all of those other places too. So you need to look at the long-term things in an economy in a country like ours, which are what leave us exposed to inflation, rather than simply trying to compensate people for the factors behind that, because to be honest, that would ultimately be self-defeating. So I think plans like our energy plan that we've talked about this morning are a much better long-term way to tackle those pressures.
Your energy plan, something that's taken the wind out of me today, if true. You're claiming that Ukraine has built more onshore wind farms than England since Russia invaded. Dear me, incredible.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And obviously the government have banned onshore wind in the UK for many years. It is the cheapest form of any kind of electricity production. They then said they would go back on that, but to be honest, they haven't fulfilled that pledge. It's still the case you'd struggle to build any kind of onshore wind in the UK. And that comparison to Ukraine, look, it's eye-catching. It tells you the scale of it. But you know, if you look at what happened across Europe from the beginning of the energy crisis, I mean, look how quickly countries responded, how they adjusted their supply chains. You don't have to have a process that takes so long to do this. Of course, you need a proper process in terms of planning, taking in all those factors, but it shouldn't be the case that we can look at a statistic like that. We can do better. We know we can do better than that, and that's why planning reform, regulation reform, national grid, public money, GB Energy, our new entity, state-owned entity that would partner with the private sector to deliver this. There are ways to do it. It isn't rocket science. And I look to the future and think we could be really optimistic about this. But more of the same, I'm afraid, will give us more of the problems we've got that people feel in their bills every month when those direct debits come through or when they're put up. We can do better, and that's at the heart of that mission we're launching today.
Jonathan, got to pull the plug on you right now. Thank you very much indeed. Jonathan Reynolds is the Shadow Business Secretary, and there's going to be a big announcement today on Labour's energy policy.
Right, with the time at 8:18, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The Home Secretary has urged police chiefs across England and Wales to ramp up the use of stop and search powers. Suella Braverman said officers who use these powers have her full support. However, critics of stop and search say it is disproportionately targeting black and ethnic minority communities.
Strikes within the healthcare system have resulted in over 500,000 NHS appointments, operations and procedures being postponed in England. Industrial action began towards the end of last year in the bitter dispute over NHS pay.
The former footballer, manager and TV pundit Graham Souness has completed a 21-mile charity swim across the English Channel. He's 70 years of age. He's raised more than £1 million for Deborah UK, a national charity supporting individuals and families affected by a certain skin condition. He completed the swim yesterday in 12 hours and 17 minutes.
Everyone has a book in them. You know, what would your book be about? You know, I look at that swim across the channel and I think, I definitely couldn't do that. It's a bit like the marathon. I look at marathon runners and think, I just know I couldn't do that.
You're not built for it.
Not built for swimming. I did do my 3 kilometres swimming when I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
I look at my 7-year-old now and I think, I don't know how I did that, because he couldn't. He couldn't. I was obviously
So much of it is mental.
Brilliant swimmer.
Yeah.
But yeah, crossing the channel.
I think amazing.
Yeah.
But Graham was motivated by a young girl he met, and he saw the pain she was in, everything she did because of her skin cracking and being so tight and sore.
Terrible.
And he basically looked at this and thought, who is fighting the battle here? Who cares about this? He's a very emotional man. He became very emotional during one of the interviews that he did as well. But there he is. I mean, he put his money where his mouth is, and he did that, and respect to him for that, which is great.
Right, stay with us. After this, a BA flight was forced to turn back after severe turbulence led to 5 people on board sustaining injuries. We'll have all the details about why our skies are turning so bumpy next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 8:24. Still to come on our programme this morning at 8:45. We're talking about stop and search. The Home Secretary has written to all 43 police forces, giving her backing to the controversial practice. We'll be asking, is it crucial to tackle crime, or does it turn young people against the police? Let us know your thoughts on that.
Just after 9 o'clock, Telegraph columnist Madeleine Grant going to be in the studio giving us her take on the latest lockdown party revelations and today's vote on Boris Johnson, amongst the things we'll be talking about. You can join in the debate, any of our discussions, email gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at gbnews. So the thing is, are you a nervous flyer? We're talking about last Friday, a flight from Singapore to London. It was over the Bay of Bengal, and 5 British Airways crew members were seriously injured. I think one dislocated an ankle, one had some sort of other fracture, and passengers were terrified when the plane encountered the most severe turbulence the airline had experienced in years.
And studies are showing that severe turbulence is on the rise, if you pardon the pun. 55% it's gone up since the 80s, and it's projected to become even more intense, frequent and prolonged in the future.
Well, a man who's never off airplanes joins us now, our travel guru, Mr. Simon Calder. Simon, you know, people will say things like, oh, you get used to it and whatever. And maybe there's a certain logic to that, because I watch all those air crash investigation programs and everything. And I often try and equate turbulence that sometimes when you're on a runway or taxiing to the runway, you feel bumps and you're moving like millimeters. So I try and equate it in my head. You're only dropping millimeters or foot or so, whatever, for a massive aircraft. Are you frightened of it? Do you have a way of coping with it, or do you look at it and say this plane is not going to fall out of the sky? What's your approach?
OK, I am a very unanxious flyer. I think every day.
Does alcohol play a part in that?
No, it doesn't actually.
No?
But aviation is incredibly safe, and therefore I have full confidence in the excellent men and women who are flying the plane. Now, the problem is that severe turbulence of the sort that we saw with British Airways Flight 12 is extremely alarming, and if you happen to be cabin crew or indeed a passenger who has ignored the seatbelt light, it can be very dangerous as well, and I do hope that the cabin crew who were injured make swift recoveries. However, while turbulence is terrifying, particularly if you are predisposed to having some flight anxiety, can I just say that it is not going to bring down the aircraft. Commercial jets are made with extreme and tested with extreme forces in mind, and they are not going to fall out the sky, and they are not going to, as some newspaper headlines have put it, plummet 1,000 feet. No, as you say, the movements were really scary, and I'm not for 1 minute wishing to diminish the anxiety, the stress, the upset that people felt. But effectively, it would not have been a 1,000-foot fall. I think they're slightly confusing that with the fact that it flew back to Singapore, because the captain took a view that the aircraft the crew obviously needed care, and the aircraft needed to be looked after. So, no, it was a horrible incident for everybody involved, but it should not put people off flying. Indeed, if you think, oh, well, flying's too dangerous, I'll go by road, you're actually putting yourself at far higher risk.
Lots of pilots watching, it seems. Christopher's got in touch from Dubai. I work as a pilot for a Middle Eastern carrier. Turbulence is an everyday issue for us. There's lots of different types. As Isabel said, mountain wave, because I'd experienced it over the Andes, which was terrifying. Clear air, convective, which is presumably over large bodies of water, like the Bay of Bengal, where this incident took place, Windshear and so on. He says, as a pilot, I try to make a PA to my passengers to tell them not to worry. And I think that's really key. This is a funny point as well. Another case study Samson said about an incident where the pilot came over the airwaves and explained what was going on. An American passenger said, if it had been any other accent, I'd have been more terrified, which I thought was quite funny. Reassuringly British in a moment of crisis.
Yes, and the worst examples I've had of turbulence, which have been really, really uncomfortable, I would characterise them as being on a theme park ride where you can't get off at the end. So you spin around for a couple of minutes and then you think, OK, well, that was great, and now I'm going to get off. You couldn't do that. And that was flying from Vienna to Cairo and from London to Singapore, indeed, not on British Airways, but over southeastern Europe. It was absolutely horrible. And what made it worse, and this speaks to what the pilot was saying, there was no kind of reassurance about what was happening, why it was happening, how it was going to last, what they were going to do.
We were talking to a pilot today, and he was saying basically they don't have equipment that can actually see this stuff and say it'll last for 10 kilometres or whatever. So I, like you, would be critical, say just talk to us, reassure us that we're going to be OK. It might be bumpy for 7 minutes or so, but he's saying they haven't got the technology that sees this.
Oh, no, and quite right too. This is clear air turbulence, which is a really serious problem because it's simply, well, it's what the name says. There is nothing that can detect it. No, weather radar is fantastically good at spotting a thunderstorm, and pilots will always steer around those, but clear air turbulence can hit anytime, anywhere. As you were saying, the incidence has actually increased 55% in the past 4 decades, and it could get worse. But the main thing is just information and understanding. And people, of course, are going to feel awful being, as they would put it, and they would feel being hurled around. But it is going to be uncomfortable, distressing, but it is certainly not going to be fatal.
Also messy. I think of, I've always got a cup of coffee or a glass of wine on the go, maybe a Bloody Mary on a flight. I like a Bloody Mary on a flight. Suddenly the turbulence hits, bam, it's everywhere. The screaming and hysteria.
You talk about the screaming. If you are nervous or you're a child, it's very hard for you to put your own fears in the background to console the child.
I think that actually, if you've got kids, it's a great distraction. I always find in these sorts of situations you focus on trying to be brave for the child. You don't realise how terrified you are yourself.
But the thing is, this is on the increase. We're not just talking about this because of that particular one flight, that they're saying that because of climate change, get used to this because it's going to happen. Could you see, for instance, certain routes? I mean, I know, for instance, if you fly to South Africa, you're guaranteed 2 hours or so over the equator where it's going to be bumpy.
Well, certainly the tropical areas tend to have more convective turbulence. So yes, I can't see that that we're going to stop flying. All the indications are that we're now getting back to levels that we were before the pandemic, and that will then increase. I think it is mostly a matter of doing exactly what you're doing this morning, which is public information, reassuring people, but acknowledging the fact that it could be getting worse in frequency, if not in extent.
But we're all agreed, pilots, just talk to us, even if you don't know anything, lie. And,
no, I don't know about that.
There's nothing reassuring, more reassuring than a voice of a pilot. No, than a pilot.
Oh, right.
Saying to you everything's OK, and it may help. Simon, continued safe travels for you, my friend. We enjoy everything you do.
Thank
you very much indeed. Thank you.
Stay with us. We're going to be discussing Meghan Markle reportedly in a multi-million-pound deal with Dior. We're going through the papers with Christopher Biggins and Emily Carver about that and the rest of the day's news next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different.
It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
The papers now, we've got Christopher Biggins and we've got Emily Carver, and they have their opinions on the stories they're seeing. Reported in the Express, page 6, the Home Secretary is telling police, hey, get your act together, ramp up the use of stop and search powers, but there's always an outcry about this, Emily.
There is always an outcry. It's got to be one of the most controversial policies, police policies there is. Various prime ministers have always tussled with it. I think it was Theresa May who said to cut down on it, and now they're bringing it back. Suella's told the police directly to ramp up the use of this stop and search. She says it will prevent violence and save more lives. There's so much conflicting information about this. All those campaign groups, as you say no, this doesn't help, this just discriminates against people of ethnic minorities and young black men in particular. On the other hand, people say, well, if you stop one young man, with a knife, then you're potentially saving his and someone else's lives. So it's a difficult one to balance. Civil liberties. Should you be able to walk down the street without the prospect of being stopped and searched? I've never experienced it myself. It must be dreadful if you haven't done anything wrong. But if it's targeted, it needs to happen.
Look, I grew up in a Northern Ireland where, 14, 15, 16, that was just a regular occurrence, and beyond, and well beyond that as well. Now, I had an attitude that I can see why they're doing this, and, get out of the car, empty your pockets, where are you going to, show me your licence, whatever, as opposed to other people I'd be in the company with, and they would say, get out of the car, sir, and they'd go, why? And there would be a whole attitude problem, and it would lead to trouble. So I don't know, Biggins, it depends. I didn't have an ego about it. I felt, I can see why it could be abused, especially with the reputation the police have, but on the other hand, I see why it is necessary. you know?
It's a very difficult one because I think you're right. It is necessary in certain places, especially. And but I think, you know, sometimes it's taken advantage of by the police, you know, and you hear those terrifying stories of young black people being thrown to the ground for no reason at all, except of their colour, you know.
Well, I think the police are often quite scared to actually tackle crime effectively because they're constantly being video cameraed and taken pictures of video cameraed. Filmed by people with smartphones and made to look bad when actually they're just trying to, you know, do a good job.
Look, well, we are doing the job of talking about this more in depth in 10 minutes' time. You're very welcome to be part of it. Stop and search GBviews at gbnews.com. Let us know what you think.
What do we think about Meghan Markle? It seems like Dior has come to her rescue after being dropped by Spotify.
I know. Well, it's terrible news, poor family. I mean, you know, they lost 15 million from their podcast deal with Spotify, and I think they've had a few other people drop out as well. But now she's going to be the new face of Dior, a multi-million-pound deal. We can sigh with relief that something's going to happen to that family.
Well,
listen,
she's the new face of it. She is a beautiful face.
She is.
The thing is, you've got to, if you're Dior, could there... Ladies, I'll ask both of you, could there be reaction to that? Could there be a backlash to that amongst certain people?
Well, I wear Miss Dior perfume, so maybe I'll boycott it now.
Oh, you won't?
From the Princess Meghan Markle. It does annoy me a little bit. You know, we've seen what Prince William is doing within the royal family now to combat homelessness. What's Meghan doing? She did a really rubbish podcast, and I can say that as a fact because I listened to it all. And it was just uninteresting. It was all about her being a victim. It was all the classic vacuous subjects that are, you know, virtue signalling, etc., etc. It was just bland, and clearly, you know, the money isn't following anymore. But if she signs up to Dior... I mean, the big thing about this is that it says £200,000 per post. This means she's going to be back on the Instagram.
Yeah.
She's going to be back on all the social media.
I'm hugely in favour of it. I really want them to find lots of revenue streams in the corporate world that do not involve talking, whinging,
I agree.
exposing the royal family.
Yeah.
Let them go and be celebrities making money.
Absolutely.
I have no objection to that, but please stop doing these kinds of attempts at journalism or whinging and trading off that, the victimhood.
No, I agree with you too.
The thing is, of course, if she does make statements while under contract to Dior and they think this impinges on their image or reputation, then it will cost her.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah.
You're right, actually, Isabel. I should celebrate this.
Yes.
Yes, departure from Netflix.
Yeah, it's the way forward.
Emily, you smell so nice, and you shouldn't give it
I
up.
keep buying it. J'adore Dior.
I'm only joking. I will continue buying.
OK, where should we go? Should we talk about...
Andy Murray?
Yeah, Andy Murray. I mean, I just see this all from a Father's Day perspective rather than the fact that he won the Nottingham Open, which actually, in tennis terms, is exciting ahead of Wimbledon. But it was really cute seeing his voice switch to...
And he was so absolutely shocked by it. I mean, he was talking about going home and later on and seeing his family and everything, and with Father's Day, as it was when he won. But I think it was just wonderful because he became very emotional, and I think he is a very emotional boy.
He loves his family.
I think it's wonderful, though, that he's won 2 big matches now, and you know, I'm going to Wimbledon next week or the week after, and I'm so excited. I'd love to see him play because I think he's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I do hope that he comes through.
He is genuinely emotional. When he won Wimbledon, I thought it did him great favours, not just in the fact that he took the title, but that he started crying during his victory speech afterwards on court. And
he was so disliked for so long. I just think it's been really unfair the way we haven't really taken him to our heart in the same way we do other sporting stars. But I do think he's kind of... People have come round. People
I
do
think
really
they
like
have
him.
now. I think they
He was
really...
just a bit standoffish, wasn't he?
Yes.
He didn't give you anything.
He's just quite dry.
Sweeter now.
Well, I think that's a Scottish thing too, isn't it? You know,
his mother was seen as cold and distant and a sort of tiger mum and whatever. And when I got to know her, completely different, a jolly, happy, caring woman, a great company to be in. So image, you know, can be deceptive.
Yeah.
And she does marvellous things for tennis.
And for girls.
And for girls, exactly. No, she's great.
Where do you want to go? Biggins, or let's do an Emily story. Go on, Eamonn, you choose.
Well, we've got foreign criminals, or Rishi Sunak. Should we go with the foreign criminals? This is another Home Office story. So we've had the stop and search, Home Office ramping that up, and now we've got the police losing, well, 1,000 foreign criminals who are on the run. So this isn't a great story for the Home Office. Spokesperson has said foreign nationals will face the full force of the law, including deportation. That never seems to happen because of their human rights, which seems to manage to keep foreign criminals in this country. There's an example here. An Iraqi rapist spent the last 15 years on the run after vanishing the day he was due to be sentenced for his crime. Seems we can't keep track of these people who commit crimes. They never get deported. And now 1,000 are on the run, absconding. We don't know where they are. It's rather frightening. The Home Office needs to get a grip.
No, absolutely, because low conviction rates, and then if you do get convicted and banged up, you can still get out and not get caught. It just feels as though it becomes increasingly easy for criminals to thrive. Crimes paying, and it has to be. There have to be strong deterrents.
So on the line now to play PopMaster is Christopher. Christopher, where are you from?
Where am I from?
Mars.
Mars, exactly. Now, I think this is a brilliant story because the brilliant but wonderful Ken Bruce, who was fired from the BBC, had PopMaster, which was... I know nothing about pop music, but I used to love listening to it. And they've now put it on television, which I think is great, with him hosting it. And the BBC turned it down and said, no, we don't want it. And there we are. It's going to be a big success for... Which channel is it?
It's More 4, I'm pretty sure it's on.
What is this kind of show?
It's on More 4.
They ask you questions about pop things. You have music, a certain amount of time.
Well, like who sung this song?
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
Like how many degrees were there?
Yeah.
3, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then...
And it's taken very seriously. And there's 2 people competing, and then there's the winner, and they get a wonderful... One gets a mug, the other one gets a T-shirt. It's fabulous. Yeah. It's
well, maybe
good.
I'll give it a go if I can drag my eyes away from GB News.
Oh, very good.
Guys, thank you both. Absolute delight to be with us today, and I hope, Biggins, you get the weather you're expecting today. You're all dressed for it.
I know. I got my shirt encouraging the sun.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. The time is 8:45.
Let's bring you up to date with today's top stories.
The Prime Minister is expected to skip a debate on the report that found Boris Johnson lied over Partygate. MPs will debate any possible punishment for the former PM after he was found to have misled Parliament. It's understood Mr Johnson's supporters are being encouraged to abstain.
Homeless charities have told the Prime Minister they're deeply concerned the government will fail to meet its target of ending rough sleeping in England by next year. More than 3,000 people were sleeping rough on a single night in autumn last year. That's up 26% on the year before.
Sir Keir Starmer will pledge to cut bills, create jobs, provide energy security in a speech later today. Earlier, the Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds told Isabel and myself that the Labour Party want to help those struggling with the energy crisis.
Forward to the future and say let's never have the kind of cost of living crisis, the kind of energy crisis which we're living through again. So for our electricity system, that means an entirely clean electricity system, so renewables and nuclear providing the majority of that, backed up with hydrogen and carbon capture, and increasingly in the future battery storage, so that we not only have an energy system which is clean and of course hits those climate objectives, but which is secure.
Now, we are debating stop and search. The Home Secretary wants Britain to double down on the controversial practice in an attempt to prevent further knife attacks.
So this policy divides a lot of you. It divides opinion. Some of you saying it's necessary. What else do you do? It's got to deter street crime. Some people, though, will argue it unfairly targets black males.
Well, let's hear both sides of that argument. We're joined by the former police officer, Oliver Lawrence, as well as the anti-racist campaigner, Wayman Bennett. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Oliver, let's start with you. You're in favour of this, and just outline why you think this can be a useful tool in trying to battle, let's face it, what is seen as a knife epidemic.
Yeah, it's an incredibly important tool in the police's armoury in preventing serious and violent crime on the streets of London. There's got to be a deterrent from young people making the erroneous decision in carrying weapons and taking them out into the public place to ultimately use against other people. And if just one stop and search or one person thinking about the likelihood of being stopped and searched carrying a weapon deters them from doing so and saves a life, it's critically important in the success of reducing violent crime in London.
Eamonn, just highlight your concerns to us, will you?
Well, firstly, it doesn't work. The IPOC report this year said simply stop and search is an ineffective way of detecting knife crime and stopping violent crime. So, firstly, stopping citizens randomly actually doesn't work. And secondly, if you look at the impacts of all the reports, right from Theresa May, has said what it actually does is increase conflict inside our cities. The last 3 major riots that took place across the country was directly related to people being stopped and searched. And thirdly, the Casey review, which was carried out by the government, said that the Metropolitan Police was institutionally racist. So the problem is that if you give tools like that to police officers that randomly stop people, then actually it leads to counter this. And, to be perfectly honest, my own children have been stopped and searched. My son had his trousers pulled down by an officer in the middle of the road. He's become a corporate lawyer. And so what I want to say is, far from stopping crime, what it does, it reinforces the idea that there's systematic and continuous institutional discrimination against young people, and it's not aimed at stopping crime.
So, Oliver, it's doing more harm than good.
Trust and confidence in the police is at an all-time low, and it is critically important that police increase that trust and confidence to allow communities to provide police with the intelligence which allows them to direct these stops and searches on the people that need to be policed. It is critically important that we increase that ability for police to get into our communities, to build that trust, to have those conversations so that communities can rely on police to then target areas of people that do need to be policed, so that those that are going about their normal business don't have to worry about being the victims of stop and search. There are instances where police have gone probably above and beyond, and people have had dreadful experiences, and those people and those officers need to be held accountable. But more importantly, it's a critically important tool in the success of reducing crime in London.
Eamonn, how do we distinguish between what is racism and what is policing, what is, keeping crime levels low? If the crime is coming from a certain area or a certain demographic, and if that is statistically proven, and I don't know if it is or isn't, I'm just saying if, when does it become racist? If those are the people, I used to say, from Northern Ireland point of view, people say, oh, why are they picking on me? Why are they picking? Because it's not people with turbans and yashmaks and whatever who are planting these bombs. It's people from your area that are planting these bombs. And there's a sort of acceptance. Believe me, I was at the receiving end of this a lot. I responded to in one way, which was to be compliant. Other people responded in different ways, which was got them ended up in the nick, basically, or detained by police for a while. I'm not saying it's easy, Eamonn. I'm not saying at all, and I sympathise with a lot of what you're saying. However, do you not think that you can call the racist word all too easy in this, and everything has to come to a stop?
Well, to be honest, it's not something which you throw out mildly. It's not me that said this. It's 3 government reports that have said that the Metropolitan Police were institutionally racist. It's not because I want it to be like that. It's because it's been formally described like that, including the last Casey review that took place. But also, don't we want something that works? We know that stop and search doesn't work. And, I work with young people a lot. I'm a former teacher. One, they say that the government themselves is not in a strong position. You've got your last Prime Minister breaking the law and not observing the law. They're not people that want to do that. And secondly, the people that want to, the resources that are needed in order to stop knife crime are things like increased amount of money targeting people that are excluded from schools and making sure that there's targeted aimed at those people that are most vulnerable. All those schemes have been cut and removed. So it seems as if there's not a seriousness from the government to try and stop that. But there is a concern about Big Brother. I mean, ever since lockdown, to be perfectly honest, we have to be incredibly careful about the loss of civil liberties, not just for black people, but for everybody. We cannot live in a society, even Winston Churchill said that if you find yourself stopped all the time being asked for your identity card, you're living in the wrong society. Now, I think that we have to be careful of these creeping rules in which a government increasingly moving to authoritarian moves says it wants to stop and search large sections of the society, and it doesn't work in terms of stopping crime. The New York police stopped stop and search because it was leading to increased friction, and concentrated on giving those officers more time to investigate serious crime. I would really like serious crime to be investigated. Why are we wasting police time, large numbers of them, doing something that's ineffective? To be perfectly honest, maybe we need to have some investigation into what's going on in Parliament. So many MPs seem to be arrested for carrying Class A drugs. Maybe some stop and search there needs to be put in a more effective way. But anyway, for our community, I think it's important that we have less conflict and more targeting, that people don't suffer from crime. And I'll stop there to give other people a chance to respond to that.
Although comparisons with the American police force, I don't know how helpful you think those are, Oliver. I mean, there are talks there about defunding the police, and obviously there are way more serious problems with racism, with gun crime and all the rest of it. And, you may also balk at that comparison. Yeah, defunding the police is certainly not a conversation I think we should really entertain. I think it's an important point in terms of the education of police and making sure we ensure officers don't have unconscious bias or stereotype, to continually educate them, to make sure that when we're carrying out stop and search, we're doing it from a basis of evidence. We've got all the facts in front of us to make good decisions, and equally getting in amongst the community, working with the community to work out how we can solve these problems to stop young people carrying dangerous weapons and using them against each other, because there are many families, these aren't just statistics, there are many families who have lost loved ones to some horrendous instance of violence, and that's what we're trying to prevent here, is young people losing their lives so tragically early on.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. As Oliver says there, I think the main thing is just preventing more loss of life from whatever direction, and deterring youngsters from carrying these knives. Eamonn, good luck with all that you're trying to do with your various organisations and meetings. And could I say, Eamonn, I'm loving that name. I'm loving that name. It's like, I'm a man, you're way man, and I think we could be brothers here. This is excellent stuff. This Wayman business, I may adopt that. Would I be cooler if I had like a name like Wayman instead of a man? Yeah, I think you're frozen. There's nothing. I think Wayman is.
I don't think he's unimpressed. I think
no,
the
he's
screen is
giggling
frozen.
away.
It looks like he's particularly unamused, which is extra funny.
Face is frozen
no, we'll call you Wayman if you want to be cool.
Thank you.
Like Wayman.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
chaps. Thanks for that. And we'll reflect lots of your views. I can see the inbox filling up with those at the moment. We're going to have a little pause. After this, we'll be discussing the latest on the police's examination of new Partygate footage, and also that vote on Boris Johnson's future. After this.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
MPs prepare to vote on Boris Johnson's future as police examine new Partygate footage.
Hello, nice to see you. It is 9 o'clock as we start the week on this Monday, the 19th of June. You tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Prime Minister will skip the vote today on the report that found Boris Johnson lied to Parliament. MPs will debate the findings, which could see Johnson barred from holding a parliamentary path.
Comes as the Metropolitan Police say it is considering new footage that shows a party at Conservative HQ during lockdown. The Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, has apologised for this, calling it indefensible.
The Treasury has ruled out helping those struggling with higher mortgage bills, saying it risks fuelling further inflation. It comes as the average mortgage rate for a 2-year fixed deal rises to 6.01%.
Ministers are considering prioritising British citizens when it comes to access to social housing. The move could be included in the King's speech in autumn in a bid to tackle concerns around migration.
And the Duke of York will not be part of the Order of the Garter procession taking place later today for the 2nd year in a row. We'll be live from Windsor as we discuss Prince Andrew's continually strained relationship with his older brother, King Charles.
And you've still got time to get in touch. Thank you if you have done that so far this morning. Simon in Bedford talking about housing and the lack of it, and the fact that the Prince of Wales is deciding to do a big thing for homelessness, donating land, building houses. Simon in Bedford says all our children have mortgages, and one thing we stress to them all, not to overstretch themselves when borrowing. Mark says it's not criminal. Take responsibility for your own actions. Anyone who thought rates would stay that low are delusional. And of course, we're due to hear the latest rates come Thursday. GB Views at gbnews.com.
So our top story this hour, MPs will today debate the report that found Boris Johnson deliberately misled Parliament, with the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet expected to be absent for the vote.
Speaking on a visit to a hospital last night, Rishi Sunak said this was a matter for members of Parliament to decide.
This committee was established under the former Prime Minister. It commanded the confidence of the House at the time, and I'm sure that they've done their work thoroughly, and I respect them for that. Obviously, this is a matter for the House, not for the government, and that's why each and individual colleagues will make up their own mind when the time comes.
So are you not going to be there?
I said each and individual colleague will make up their own mind when the time comes. This is a matter for the House rather than for the government. It's an important distinction, and that's why I wouldn't want to influence anyone in advance of that vote.
Well, it comes as police examine that new footage from Conservative Party HQ during lockdown, which showed people breaking the rules. Let's discuss all of this with columnist and parliamentary sketch writer at the Daily Telegraph, Madeleine Grant. Good morning to you. There's a point Eamonn was making earlier about what the Prime Minister had to say. The last time he checked, he is also an MP. Saying it's a matter for MPs and not the government isn't really getting him out of this one. He's avoiding it for a different reason, isn't he?
Well, I actually think he's done a remarkably good job of getting himself out of the whole affair. It was actually quite a sensible move, I think, for him to make it a one-line whip. It therefore depoliticises it and takes the toxicity out of the debate. It gives lots of MPs an opportunity to find that they're very busy doing constituency work and therefore avoiding that vote. And he can now sort of say that as Prime Minister, I can kind of stand above this and let the MPs battle it out.
And a lot of them are being sent to one constituency, and that constituency is at the moment held by Boris Johnson in Uxbridge.
Yes, that's right. And again, a great opportunity not to be in the Commons for this. And it actually looks very much like it's not going to be going to a vote at all. It looks like what the Speaker will do in these situations where it is a one-line whip is they kind of announce the motion and listening for ayes and nays in the audience of the Commons. And it seems unlikely that there will be enough people yelling nay that they will put up sufficient opposition that it will then go to a vote.
Madeleine, let me ask you this. You will know as well as I do, there will be people who will say this is right and this is just, that these people should be held to account, one rule for one rule for the rest of us. But equally, could you ever consider, we were discussing this earlier, that there should be a statute of limitations associated with this, and that we don't want to be finding footage 6 years from now showing certain people breaking lockdown and whatever, that there must come a point where we draw a line under it and we say it was wrong, but that's it, we're not pursuing it anymore, that's it?
Well, I've always said that I think there should be a general amnesty for the lockdown rules that were broken, and there are people who are even now being fined for things that happened in 2020 because, I mean, members of the public, because the courts are so backed up that it's taken this long for cases to be heard. And I think the government should have just called a general amnesty, which would have helped them rather, because now that it's continually emerging that MPs like Sir Bernard Jenkins possibly and members of CCHQ have also been caught up in this. It would have been a very good thing if they could just draw a line under it long ago, which they could have done.
I think there's legitimate questions about whether it is actually a good use of police time and whether or not actually it's priced in now. We know this happened and it actually isn't causing the political damage that perhaps those people that are leaking it out are hoping.
Yeah.
You know, Rishi Sunak's government have managed, as you say, they kind of dealt with it. Is it actually causing him any pain, these new revelations?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the point about being baked in or priced in, I think the pain it is causing is that because we are still talking about the Partygate psychodrama and we are talking about these aids, it does, I suppose, take attention away from whatever the Prime Minister is trying to set out his stall on, his policies. You know, we're not far away from a general election, and I think there are probably members of the public who don't really know what this government stands for. It's very hard to get that message out there when the media cycle is full of the psychodrama at all times.
Isabel, let me have the sun, will you, there? I'll tell you why. Because I often start the day, and there's a little section here which gives you people's birthdays. Oh, it is. Here it is. Here it is. So today's birthdays are Boris Johnson, who is 59 today. Would he have reason to celebrate that?
Will he have a cake?
Yeah, 59 today.
59. Well, he's got his looks like maybe a week or 2 weeks away from becoming a father again, yet again.
That's one a year since he's been with Carrie, isn't it? 2020, 2021, 23. They'll have 3 under 3.
I mean,
it's good going.
Yeah,
for Boris.
Rather them than me.
Yeah,
Do you know who has aged considerably, obviously with worry and stress and whatever? I think Nicola Sturgeon. She was back in front of the cameras yesterday, and again, if there's one of the newspapers there, I mean, visibly, you sort of jump back and you think, this is taking its toll on elfin-looking Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, she always had a wonderful number in power dressing. I thought her suits were fantastic, usually in a block colour and very well tailored. So I know that's a very that's quite a non-dry thing
She's
to talk
saying
about.
she's back in business. She's just going to soldier on. She's going to represent her constituency. And because she's convinced she's done absolutely nothing wrong and no one's brought any charges against her.
Well, I mean, the trouble is that, I mean, it's just a completely unprecedented situation. Penny Mordaunt in the Commons last week made a fantastic joke to someone from the SNP saying that Hamza Yousaf was the first SNP leader in the party's history not to have been arrested. You know, this is not going away. And for Nicola Sturgeon, I mean, wasn't it fascinating that she was taking her theory test recently? I think she was learning to drive. Yeah, I think
she said that in her resignation speech. Yeah. That was one of the things she wanted to spend time doing.
Yes, and I think one of the very pro-SNP media outlets reported it as, you know, well done, our glorious leader, and people were just having none of it. You know, they were just, you know, you can't cover up this mess anymore. It's going to be out in the open very soon.
Interesting, though, that on the front of your paper, they are leading not on lockdown parties, not on votes on Boris Johnson, but on what Sir Keir Starmer will be pushing today in his big speech north of the border in Edinburgh. Lots of controversy around his plans, which he's had to scale back because they couldn't make it all add up. Borrowing $28 billion a year, turns out, wasn't necessarily good fiscal planning. But what do you make of his suggestions? He's going to try and sort out what he thinks are archaic and slow planning rules. He wants to build on Greenbelt for solar panels, wind turbines. He says within a year of being in office, he'll get rid of the Conservative kind of moratorium on onshore wind. I mean, is that to be welcomed?
I think it is to be welcomed. I think we need to be building more and looking to generate energy using the resources we have. It makes absolutely no sense to be importing it from abroad when we might be either fracking for it or generating it on our own land. I actually think the Labour Party have been pretty strong on this stuff, and they seem to mean business about housing and planning. Obviously, these issues are incredibly complex because we have a system that gives a lot of power to local communities to object, and in general, local communities seem to object. I'm not really sure that what they've suggested so far will really square that circle, but it's certainly the noises they're making are a lot stronger than the Conservatives' performance on this over the last few years.
Well, stay with us, Madeleine. Madeleine will be here towards the end of the programme again when we've got more things, lots more things to discuss, particularly what your views are on today's news. GB Views at gbnews.com.
Now, if in the hot weather over the weekend you enjoyed a glass of vino, then you're not alone. Almost half of us are regular wine drinkers, and sales are growing, unsurprisingly, every year.
But forget the south of France or the southern hemisphere. The UK wine market is now valued at
over £17.5 billion.
That's a lot of drinks.
With 800 vineyards across the UK.
Well, today is the start of English Wine Week, and our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, has been to visit a vineyard in Shropshire to find out some more.
When it comes to a bottle of wine, England is probably not the country you'd think of as the place to go. In fact, the UK has been more committed to drinking it, ranking 6th in the world for overall consumption. But over the past decade, things have changed dramatically, and England is an exciting force in the wine world, producing world-class vintages and winning prestigious awards. There are now over 800 vineyards across Britain, and the family-run Hencote Vineyard and Winery in Shropshire is one of those making an impression, having previously won gold at the International Wine Challenge. Managing Director Mark Stevens says vineyards like his across the country are breaking the stigma of winemaking.
There's still that idea that growing vines or having vineyards is a romantic continental notion, and it's not so much seen in the UK, although it is increasing in popularity. And the other is wow, I didn't realise just how much work it takes. to produce quality wine, because you can put a vine in the ground, you can press the grapes, and you can produce wine from that. But to make that difference in such a cool climate, to really make that difference for medal-winning wines, there's a really precise amount of work that's required.
In 2021, more than 9 million bottles of English wine were sold around the world. That's up 31% on the previous year. Sparkling wine accounted for 68% of the different varieties sold.
Now, we know weather here in the UK can be inconsistent, from sunshine like it is today to frost in the winter. So what are some of the adaptations that vineyards have to make here?
Gavin Patterson is the winemaker at Hencote and says heat is just one of the challenges they must overcome.
Well, one of the challenges, actually, we see it as, is the light intensity and heat. Just due to our latitude, we focus a lot on canopy management in our vineyards to optimize exposure to sunshine and obviously heat as and when we are able to get the sun shining on the grapes, so that we can get the grapes fully ripe.
But as a nation of wine drinkers, are people across the country in favour of a homegrown grape?
Have you ever tried English wine?
No.
Would you try English wine?
I'd try anything if it was going cheap.
I think it's got a burgeoning reputation, let's say, you know, that I think there's more of it, and if it was more like prevalent, then I'd probably choose to drink it, yeah.
It's okay, it's expensively sour, shall we say.
I would buy it. You don't see it so often, or, you know, it tends to be a bit more expensive than the other wines, but you get what you pay for, I guess. So yeah, I would definitely buy it.
As time goes on, winemakers learn from every harvest, and the British industry seems to be going in the direction of growth. The future looks bright for vineyards across the country. Jack Carson, GB News, Shropshire.
Now, Madeleine, how does that make you feel there?
Well, I suppose a little patriotic. I think the English wine industry clearly seems to be coming to its own.
Yeah. Are you doing your bit for the English wine industry?
Not enough. I'll try and do a bit more. I'll do some research.
How noble.
I think things that are cold and crisp are very refreshing.
There's nothing
very
better
nice.
than seeing condensation running down the side of a glass.
Yes,
Really
very
chill.
good.
All right, 9:15 is the time. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The Home Secretary has urged police chiefs across England and Wales to ramp up the use of stop and search. Suella Braverman said officers who use the powers have her full support. However, critics say it is disproportionately targeting black and ethnic minority communities.
Strikes within the healthcare system have resulted in over 500,000 NHS appointments, operations and procedures being postponed in England. Industrial action began towards the end of last year in the bitter dispute over NHS pay and conditions.
Here's an interesting one. New research showing employment for those of you over the age of 65 has reached a record high, 1.5 million people. The group says it's driven by different factors, including ageing population, increases to pension age, and the cost of living crisis. Two people now who are forced to work well into their retirement age.
Hello.
Andrew Pearce and Dawn Neeson.
He can be so cruel. That's so honest, but so cruel.
No, but were we not promised that we would all be on cruise ships and retire?
None of you want to be, don't be silly. None of you want to be.
If I'm on the cruise ship with these two, no, definitely not, possibly. Sorry, Eamonn, didn't mean it.
I'd love to go on a cruise with Andrew Pearce.
It would be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
Fun. And we're going to have a lot of fun in the programme. We've got a really interesting interview this morning with David Warburton. He's the MP who's standing down, triggering yet another by-election. He was in a cocaine sex sting with a Sunday newspaper.
Yes.
Coming to talk to us about why he feels he's been so badly done by.
First time ever on GB News.
Good.
Also, Partygate not going away. Big vote tonight, but has Partygate pooped?
It's trying to humiliate Boris Johnson. Does anyone really care? Most people aren't going to be there, including the Prime Minister, won't be there for the vote. Boris is at home in Oxfordshire with his family,
having another
enjoying
party.
his birthday party.
No.
This one's within the rules.
Yes.
We were sort of saying, point made, now statute of limitations on this. We don't want to be going on for this forever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
Well, we've got David Cameron today in the official inquiry into COVID. It's going to go on till at least 2027. You just lose the world to live, to have any interest?
Well, you know what? Rishi Sunak's actually meeting the Swedish Prime Minister today as well.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, but do you think he might get some advice? The Swedes
They
managed to
wrapped it up.
they wrapped it up
So
in 6 months.
quickly.
Bit of advice on how to get this one over and done with?
I mean,
They didn't do lockdown, did they? So it's probably not as much
No.
to
They used
comb through.
common sense, didn't they?
Yeah.
There's a thing.
Right, we look forward to Andrew, Dawn.
Oh,
thank
and
you
there's some
very much.
fashion.
Oh, yeah?
Because we're twinning in beige.
Well,
We've
it's
got
obviously
fashion
the
with
way
Meghan
to-
Markle.
Yes, that great feminist icon who's about to become a clothes horse for a fashion house.
Yeah. Well, I have a view on that. I think it's good if they're going to make money away from selling their stories and their sob stories. All power to them if they want to go and make commercial deals.
Fine.
Just don't keep whinging.
She's going to be an influencer, Isabel. She'll be on Love Island before you know it.
Cameron Walker influences us very shortly. He'll be discussing the ongoing rivalry between the King and Prince Andrew, as the disgraced Duke is banned from attending today's Order of the Garter procession. Live from Windsor, next.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Uh, 22 minutes past the hour of 9 o'clock on this Monday morning. I'm trying to guess what the weather is like. I see sunshine, Isabel.
Yeah, sunshine, good news. More of this lovely weather continuing after the thunderstorms. That means it'll be nice for the Order of Garter procession.
I see sunshine on a cloudy day.
Know that one. Phew.
It's not going to come to me.
What can make you feel
my
this way?
guy.
My girl.
My girl. My guy.
My girl.
My girl. My girl. My girl. Who is that? Who sings that?
I don't know.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows anything. Anyway, no doubt you'll tell us. Prince Andrew. Let's talk about him.
Yeah, he's going to be left out of the Order of the Garter procession, which is taking place in Windsor today.
Prince Andrew is also the Duke of York. He was barred from taking part last year in this, but he was allowed to dress up in the Garter robes, which are the most ridiculous-looking things.
All the feathers.
They're very camp.
Ostrich feathers or something. With black
and a garter. And a garter.
Well, look, let's find out more about today's event from our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who is there for us, where all the planning is taking place. I mean, what's the history, first of all, of this Order of the Garter procession? And then how much of a snub is it, really, for Prince Andrew to be excluded again?
Well, the Order of Garter is the oldest and most noble order of chivalry in Britain. It's a tradition dating back almost 700 years and takes its inspiration, Isabel, from the legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Now, there's 24 knights or ladies in total. The king chooses, or the monarch indeed, chooses who is a knight or lady of the Garter. Last year, the Queen Camilla, was appointed a Lady of the Most Noble Order of the Garter by the late Queen Elizabeth II. But someone who is still a Knight of the Garter, despite all of the controversies, is Prince Andrew. He is still proving a conundrum for the king, and like it or not, he is still a Knight of the Garter. And Prince Andrew gave an indication that he wants the world to know that, because last month, if you remember, he wore his Garter robes to the king's coronation. But like last year, as you said, he is not expected to take part in any of the public events of the day, but it is thought he will take part in the investiture ceremony in the throne room, as well as attend the lunch in the Waterloo Chamber in Windsor Castle, before the rest of them walk down from the castle to St George's Chapel for a service, and then join a carriage procession back up again. But of course, there are not just members of the royal family who are part of the Order of the Garter. Former Prime Ministers Tony Blair and Sir John Major, they are also Knights of the Garter, as well as Baroness Manningham Buller. She is the former Director General even of MI5. Princess of Wales, Catherine, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, they are not members of the Order of the Garter yet, but I'm sure perhaps in a couple of years, perhaps the King will decide to make them ladies of the Garter. But despite the new reign, of course, the tradition still continues here, and we expect to see members of the royal family this afternoon.
Very much indeed, Cameron. As a sketch writer, parliamentary sketch writer of the Daily Telegraph, Madeleine Grant is with us now. This is a dream for you to write on that. All the finery or whatever. I
love it.
What do you make of this?
I think it's great fun. It's beautiful. I mean, countries that have got rid of these things, I don't think they're happier or better off for having done so. Whereas I think this stuff is a very visceral link to the past, and also, a great spectacle of ceremonial. I really like the idea that something going back to 1348 is still kind of alive and well today.
If I came in wearing my garters, would that change your impression? Do you think I would carry less authority or more authority?
If it was real and you weren't just doing fancy dress, then more. But if it was just to be turned up randomly in makeup at 4 a.m. with some strange costume on, I'd probably laugh at you.
You'd have to really own it, I think. You have to come in with the right attitude if you're going to wear those robes.
Prince Andrew's the perfect character for that sort of thing.
Has he got a house to live in at the moment?
I think there is basically, he can no longer pay for the Royal Lodge, so the King is basically saying, I won't subsidise you and you have to vacate. But this is...
Pay for it yourself?
Yeah, pay for it yourself. Go and live in Frogmore.
Debt has always followed him and his ex-wife around.
Yes.
Do you think he has been humiliated and punished enough? Is enough? Or is there more to come?
Well, I think it's the correct thing to do, that he shouldn't take part in these big public ceremonial occasions, because I think it will distract all attention away from everyone else that's there and the purpose of the ceremony.
Madeleine, fascinating to listen to you. Thank you very much indeed, Madeleine Grant there.
That's it from us. We'll be back bright and early tomorrow morning. Up next, it's Andrew and Dawn with To The Point.
Have a good day, everybody.
Well, it's me and Dawn today,
Yeah,
which is a
we're
joy.
ready, and we have got a fun-packed show, haven't we?
We do.
We're going to have some fun.
We've
Proper
got a
fun.
really good interview coming up with David Warburton. He's the Tory MP who's standing down, causing another by-election. He was in a cocaine and sex sting involving a newspaper.
Absolutely, but first time on GB News.
First time on GB News, so stay tuned in for that. Also, Partygate, the big vote tonight, fizzle out, attempt to humiliate Boris Johnson.
Soggy bottomed like a sour birthday cake, isn't it?
I think it has. And of course, Meghan. We're going to talk about her.
Fashion. She's a fashion industry now.
Like you.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast, whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart